Artu? Where are you? Artu? Artu? Huh? Artu, you're on fire! R2-D2, you found a cigarette. Well, I don't think smoking is grown up at all. Because it's very dangerous. Smoking does dreadful things to your lungs and is very bad for your heart. Well, I know I don't have one, but humans do, and I think we should set a good example. Well done, R2. Oh, hello. You know smoking is bad for your health, and it isn't grown up at all. So please, don't smoke. R2, do you really think I don't have a heart?
With coronavirus spreading, people at higher risk must take extra precautions. You're at higher risk if you're over 65 or if you have an underlying medical condition. Please visit coronavirus.gov for more information.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds.
There is a practical way to reduce air pollution. Just go to EnergyStar.gov, where the EPA can show you how to make a difference.
40% of food in America never gets eaten. When we start to think differently about our food, we can get a lot more out of it.
In the months before the United States entered World War II, Salt Lake City leaders were grappling with the black pall of smoke hanging over the city that we refer to today as the inversion. In March of 1941, city leaders and city smoke abatement engineer William F. Butler set out to create a set of ordinances that would clear the air. As part of their comprehensive plan, the city's Smoke Control Division was born. The division, headed by city engineer Butler, was tasked with enforcing new smokeless fuel standards and ensuring heating equipment, furnaces, and boilers were optimized to be as efficient and smokeless as possible. They also outlawed the burning of leaves and trash in the city. The railroad industry was seen as the leading cause of the smoke, and they were given just 6 months to comply with the new rules. The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad alone spent $100,000 to comply, using new technology to improve cold starts of trains and reduce their pollution output considerably. Over the course of the next few years, much progress was made by the city to work with industry to reduce burning, help residents convert their winter heating to natural gas, and reduce pollution from city vehicles. Even the city and county building's boiler underwent a renovation to bring it up to the new standards. The Smoke Control Division did its best to help with the inversion problem until 1944, when its name was changed to the Power and Heating Division, since so much of their work was dedicated to helping residents and industry eliminate burning in their methods of heating. By 1949, city engineers estimated that they had reduced the layer of smoke over Salt Lake City by 80%. But with the ushering in of a new commuter age, automobiles and new industries undid much of the work the city did under the Smoke Control Division, making today's efforts to clear the air all the more important.
Cuando te pongan a prueba, no te rindas. Arranca solo después de oír el clic del cinturón, porque cada 8 minutos un pasajero de 8 a 14 años resulta lastimado en un choque.
Hey, Dad!
Hey, honey. Ho, 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 ho. Name, please.
Caitlin.
Check. Go.
Kaylee. Carly.
Who are you?
That's Carly, our next door neighbor.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Carly.
Hi.
It isn't easy to keep your kids from drinking, but one way is to get to know their friends. Just stay involved. You'll get through.
why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
In the 1870s, Commercial Street, which we know of today as Regent Street, was the heart of Salt Lake City's red light district. It flourished in that location for more than 30 years, despite frequent raids by the police. It was in the early 1900s that Salt Lake City Mayor John Bransford proposed to the city council that they create a formal registration for the women who worked there, charge them fines of $10 a month each, and that they build a dedicated building for the red light district in a different part of town. The city council agreed, and they went to work constructing what they called the Stockade and retained the services of Dora Topham, who went by the name of Madam Belle London, to oversee operations. On December 18, 1908, and at a great expense to city taxpayers, construction of the stockade was completed on Block 64 between 1st and 2nd South and 5th and 6th West. Women operating on Commercial Street were forced to ply their trade at the new location immediately or face arrest and fines. The red light district operated on the west side at that location until 1911, when Madam London quit after a run-in with the law. The red lights went out and the building was soon torn down. Women operating from the stockades soon returned back to Commercial Street, and business resumed normally, much to the dismay of city officials.
Heads up, Utah. Wondering what to do if you run out of gas on the freeway? Follow these 3 simple steps. 1. Call 911. Following these steps will help keep you and those around you safe.
Truth is, I'm impressed. I haven't been asked such intelligent questions in a long time. Nice.
Park like a pro by not parking at red-bagged meters. If you are looking for a parking spot and come across a red-bagged meter, do not park here. An organization, business, or special event has reserved this meter with a parking meter permit to ensure the space remains unused. Parking meter permits are issued by the city's transportation department. If you park at a bagged meter, your vehicle will be subject to towing and impoundment, as it is a violation of Salt Lake City Ordinance 12.56.180. There are no exceptions. Thank you for parking like a pro. If you have questions about the red-bagged meters, please feel free to contact Salt Lake City Compliance.
In the early 1960s, William Shatner was a young stage actor hoping to make his big break into television. He'd done many live stage shows for the medium and had found iconic guest parts on anthology shows like Alfred Hitchcock Presents and The Twilight Zone, though he hadn't yet found his breakthrough role. In 1964, he finally booked a pilot that he thought was going to be the one, Alexander the Great.
I did not cross the sea to conquer Persia. I came to put an end to the barbarism that rots this land and has plagued Greece for 200 years. I came to put an end to wars forever.
It shot for 6 months all over the state of Utah, bringing in actors like William Shatner, John Cassavetes, Joseph Cotten, and Adam West. Unfortunately, Alexander the Great did not turn out like the producers had hoped and was shelved. Shatner went on to record other pilots, but took a job in Salt Lake City, opening a play by Norman Corwin called The Hyphen. It premiered at the Pioneer Theater on the University of Utah campus on March 24, 1966, and played through April 2nd. The intention was to debut the play in Utah and then move it to New York, but while these preparations had been made, Shatner found out that one of the pilots he'd shot just before the Salt Lake City debut of the play had been picked up by NBC for a series. That show? Star Trek. Shatner
again. Welcome, everyone, to our hybrid meeting. We are in person, as you can see, and also streaming online, and people can participate online as well. We are following the mask mandate and would ask that if anybody shows up, we don't have public comment during our work session, but if people do show up in person during the formal session for public comment, that you abide by our mask rule. If you don't want to, then we'd ask you to leave, and you can certainly watch online and in other areas. So just as a reminder there. It really is so exciting to be in person. And let's see. I do want to say that, nope, went through that. Sorry, I'm looking at my script. We went through the mask mandate. There's no public comment during work session. You can join us. Our feedback is always welcome. You can share with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114. Emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. Council members may, and the public when it's time for public comment, may take their masks off to speak, but otherwise we ask that they be worn during the meeting. Let's see. We are on to our first item, which is updates from the administration. Yeah. Please, because that's where the microphone is. We have Madam Mayor here, and I will turn the time over to her.
Thanks, Council. It's been a little while. It's so nice to see
Madam
you.
Mayor, if you don't mind, we are asking that you remove the mask just while you're speaking because it is easier for the recording.
Got it.
Thanks so much.
Can you hear me okay? Thanks for bringing up the update there. I'll walk you through it. No shocking new numbers just yet. Still, to the next slide, please. The majority of our counties remain in that very high transmission rate. COVID ICU utilization is quite high at 40%. The ICUs are basically full statewide. And almost 21% of kids 5 to 11 have had that first shot. We're inching closer to 500,000 people statewide who have received a booster shot, which is good news, and we need it desperately at this point. Let's go to the next slide. Cases remain about 1,100. Our 7-day average is 1,500 cases per day as a state. Of those that you can see, 174 were school-aged, 11 new deaths, unfortunately, reported today. And we've got just about 61% of Utahns fully vaccinated. Our next slide is just Salt Lake City 14-day snapshot, and the data, as you'll see, only goes through December 2nd because it takes a couple days for the county to update that. But you're seeing and you're hearing in the news that it's rising again. The case numbers are not good right now, and they are not yet attributing that increased numbers in the last 3 days that are reported to the Omicron virus directly, as they're awaiting in the next week or two some more definitive information about what the impacts of that particular variant are on our population and how impactful it is in terms of the severity of it. The next slide is specifically about that, and Salt Lake County Health Department has let us know that they're looking at what kind of policy recommendation they may want to make. At this point, they are not making any policy recommendations for entities such as the City Council and city councils around the county to consider with regard to, or mayors, with regard to potential limitations on mass gatherings. But at this point, they are really encouraging people who are unvaccinated and unboosted to not attend indoor mass gatherings. And they've looked at how, in trying to figure out how to get more people vaccinated and more people getting boosters, they know that their busiest vaccination days are on the weekend, and that the health department is the only entity giving vaccinations or boosters that doesn't require an appointment. So they're pretty dramatically expanding their weekend vaccination opportunities starting this Saturday and Sunday. They're going to be operating at this point through the end of January is scheduled out for every weekend except for December 25th. And there's a good list of those Clinics are open 10 to 4 every Saturday and Sunday at Redwood Road and at the Government Center down on 21st and State Street. So for Salt Lake City residents, those are convenient. And our next slide is with the school district vaccination sites. You can see that full list at slcschools.org. And there are so many vaccination opportunities. Walk in, no appointments necessary. Please take advantage of it. And council, if there's anything that we can do to help connect you for your communication with the residents you are in contact with to help, let us know. We want to help make that as easy as possible. Next, we're getting into Andrew Johnston. And just being in this room, I almost called him Councilmember Johnston, but I haven't felt that urge in a long time. And Andrew's joining us virtually today to give you an, oh, I'm sorry, I'm skipping the vaccination rates, but that's the slide we update for you each Tuesday that you meet. And those are our 3 most impacted zip codes in the state or in the city. Our citywide average, you'll notice, is 67% for fully vaccinated. The state is only just over 61%. So we're having improvement there. Andrew, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, except I did skip one more slide, which I apologize, Andrew, is the countywide demographic update that we bring you each week. Are there any questions for me before I hand it off to Andrew? Thanks. Great to be back with you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can we make Andrew's face bigger?
Waiting all week for somebody to say that.
Oh, I forgot you had slides. Never mind. We'll just keep it at that. Okay, go take it away, Andrew.
I apologize. Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize I can't be there today in person. The first slide is a typical one about the census at the resource centers. It is smaller. I apologize for that if you can't. The most recent week this past week, mostly due to the Geraldine Women's Center dropping a little bit in their census, though it's still running quite high, effectively full, over 95%. On the far right of that top one, you'll also see a new column, which is for the overflow at St. Vincent de Paul Dining Hall. And we'll have that going forward through the wintertime so you get a sense of how many folks are utilizing that. Next slide. This is the update about the final resource fair. You can see we had it at Madsen Park on the 30th. I'm going to try and go off of memory since I can't really see the details of the slide on my phone, but we had a lot of folks there. The next slide will show you a lot of the providers we had there, a lot of the outcomes, a lot of services were provided to folks, and it was actually very, very successful there. Similarly, providers, I think this is the largest providers we've had at any resource fair this year. And at the very bottom, we had lunch as well from a number of 3 groups. And UTA also was distributing bus passes and transit passes, which is a big deal. So thank you very much to all those partners who helped us out. Next slide. This is about some of the new and pending things happening. The Point, which was formerly known as the Airport Inn, did open a couple of weeks ago. They do have 134 beds available in 100 rooms, so some are double occupancy, and they are charging $450 a month, essentially. It's broken down per week. So I think they've got these town that the use regulation, they are still trying to hire up that facility. Based on fire code, they're looking at 35 beds and then staff on top of that. And then the high needs overflow motel, which is the option on North Temple we've discussed previously, that is still going through the process of the safety and security plan. Looking at hiring staff to try and plan and get things rolling there. And they're looking at 250 beds as the max as identified by the council. There's also a variety of rooms in there they could use for flexing different populations as they need to. So we're talking about those who are older or medically frail or vulnerable, the unsheltered in general who are outside on the streets in that area. So we'll have more information on those two as we go forward into the month. Next slide.
Andrew, before you go to the next slide, you're kind of cutting in and out.
Sure.
Maybe if you turn your camera off, it'll help with the connection with your voice.
I would love to turn my camera off, Madam Chair. All right, is that any better?
Hopefully, yeah.
Andrew?
Okay, we'll try.
I have a quick question for you. On the previous slide, you were talking about St. Vincent de Paul. Is that accurate for St. Vinny's, or should that be Wiegand?
Excuse me, you're right, Councilmember Ferris. That is Wiegand. That is, it was mislabeled by myself. So yes, that should have been the Wiegand. St. Vincent de Paul is open. The Wiegand is looking to open as soon as possible.
And so should we be just adding another segment on there for St. Vincent as well? On that slide?
Segment onto
that
the slide?
Yeah.
So St. Vincent de Paul is on the first slide with the census. On the far right, we'll have the ongoing census numbers every week for you as you meet.
Thank you.
Sure. And I can get that mailed out to everybody as well, so you can take a better look at the numbers as you want. We'll have that to your staff. Let's go to the next slide. And there we go. So those of you in the council may remember this slide from a few meetings back, maybe one or two meetings. This was talking about the need for emergency shelter on the left-hand column, for deeply affordable housing on the right-hand column, and then the years on the left, 21, 22 through 24, and the total need as projected by the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness. As you can see, 1,700 emergency beds typically, and same this winter, but we need in the next 3 years now, 7,000 units. So trying to make sure we all keep our focus on the housing discussion as really the solution here. That really needs to stay as the primary objective for all of our efforts. I wanted to start with this slide because the next slide will talk a little more about that, the next two actually. Next slide, please. This is the same deeply affordable housing on the right-hand column. On the left are the years, 21 through 24. PSH, that middle column, is of the deeply affordable housing numbers, how many are projected to need to be permanent supportive housing, the highest level of support, essentially. It's generally about 15% of the total deeply affordable housing numbers. So you'll see in the next 3 years, we need about 1,000 of those compared to 7,000 of the total deeply affordable housing numbers. This is important because this is a population that is underserved. It is also a population that has the least amount of housing resources, and also a population that takes up the greatest number of both emergency shelter bed nights and also tends to be very prominent on the streets or camping situations as well. We go to the next slide. This are the stats that are important for us. As we move forward as a city in discussing housing and housing policy, which is happening currently within CAN and the admin departments, right now, as of today, we estimate that of the entire state of Utah, that left-hand column there, all the permanent supportive housing in the entire state that we're aware of, 60% of it is in Salt Lake City right now. Within Salt Lake County on the right, we estimate, based on what we know, almost 3/4 of all the permanent supportive housing exists in our city right now, Salt Lake City. So as we move forward in discussions about creating deeply affordable housing, creating permanent supportive housing, this is an important factor. It should talk a lot about how we envision sort of dispersal of deeply affordable or permanent supportive housing, what the city's role should be moving forward, which I think we still should discuss and come to ideas about. But I want to make sure the council was aware of these numbers as you move into your own discussions and as we move into next year, that we can keep creating permanent supportive housing and deeply affordable, which is great. But we also have to keep in mind it's disproportionately already in our city. And the more resources we know that end up in Salt Lake City, and the mayor's talked about this, the more the housing comes here and the more the services come here again. And it's sort of that circular pattern. The more we build, the more they come. And so we have to keep that in mind and talk to the county and cities and the state about what the city's role should be, what we envision it should be, and how we ensure that there's affordable housing in as many locations as possible, and not just one city. Any questions on that?
Nope.
That's all I have, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. I see Chief Brown up there. Do we have an update from Chief Brown? I see a head nod from Madam Mayor. So, Chief, I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Council. It's good to be with you after a couple weeks off. Hey, I want to get back and share with the Council some CompStat numbers that are hot off the press today. As you know, the #1 goal of our crime control plan is to reduce crime. Absolutely, to reduce crime in the communities of Salt Lake City. And I want you to know we are headed in the right direction, but we still have a lot of work to do. And crime does happen, and it doesn't always have to be violent crime. It still has a huge impact in our community. Anywhere from property crimes, including the windows that were broken out in the area of 1900 South and 2800 East that we're investigating right now. On the flip side, we know just the sound of crime, like hearing gunshots, can leave people feeling unsafe. That's why our officers are working hard every day to address crime. And for that, I want to thank them. And so now to the numbers, Council. This is for the week of November 29th to December 5th. Citywide overall crime is down 23% in the last 28 days. Citywide violent crime is down 1% in the last 28 days. Citywide property crimes are down 25% in the last 28 days. And then citywide overall crime is down 4.3% year to date, and citywide overall crime is down 0.4, almost 0.5% year to date over the 5-year average. That's moving the needle, and I just want to thank the officers for the hard work that they're giving the communities that we serve. Thanks, Council.
Thank you, Chief.
Any questions?
Any questions for the Chief? No questions. Thanks for being here with us, Chief.
Yeah, and then I'd like to turn the time over to Captain Scott Tierlink. He's got a quick review of some technologies that we're looking at. I want to thank Councilmember Dugan for the time he spent over here with us at the technology fair that we had. And with that, I'll turn the time over to Scott. Thank you.
Thank you. So we had a request to give an update to the council on 3 of our items that we're working on technology-wise. So I wanted to update you on those 3 items, and then there's 2 additional ones that we thought that the council would be very interested to see a couple of the exciting new technologies that are coming hopefully in the upcoming year that will really help us to connect better with our citizens and to engage our community more with us. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. The first one that we were asked to give an update on is our drone program. We're currently researching best practices. We're actually pretty complete on the research part of it. We're working with other agencies as far as working with them to see what has worked well with other agencies. We're being very cautious and careful with our policy and the implementation plan to make sure that we have our program focus, which is detailed out there of what we're really focusing this program to be on. Again, the things that we really want to look to is to make sure that we're doing things for the right reason, that we're protecting our citizen rights, that we are using de-escalation tools and force multipliers so that we can do more with less wherever we can. This program will be implemented in stages. We'll look to this upcoming fiscal year to get the funding request into our annual budget, and if that is approved, then we'll start with the first year stage, and then depending on the success of that program, we would look to expand it from there. And next slide. The second one I was asked to talk about is the mobile camera and license plate readers. We're working with 2 different companies. One is called Flock Safety, and the other one is Vigilant Solutions, which is owned by Motorola. Both of these companies are providing us a free 1-year test and trial of 25 cameras. So in the coming couple of months, we'll be putting these cameras up as a test to see which systems we like the best, and we don't have to pick one or the other. This is one where several cities actually utilize both for different systems. So we're working again with other agencies to determine best practices, what has been determined to work really well other places. And we're going through the careful policy and implementation plan again focusing on the protection of our citizen rights and privacy, and to utilize it for the right reasons, again, for crime reduction as a force multiplier and having transparency with our community. Again, this one is not funded yet. This will be a funding request on our annual budget. And if approved, we'll look to kick this off in the coming fiscal year also. Next slide. The third one that we were asked to report on is just an update on our Axon software that Council funded recently. With that, there's 4 really important tools that we are working on right now. The first one is performance. We're actively configuring that to get it integrated with our other systems. That should be completed in the coming 2 months. And what that program does is it helps us to see live how we're doing on all of the different legislative intents with body-worn cameras, so that we can see if we're at 100% or what percentage of activations we're having, if our officers are tagging the video correctly. We can also determine the life of the battery, make sure the devices are working, and a whole bunch of other things, including automating the audit of our body-worn camera program so that we have more timely and better audits of our program. The Respond Plus, that one is active and is functional. We're just finalizing the policy and procedures of how to utilize that. That is a way that we can look and see on a map live where every camera is in the city. And we can live stream any camera that is recording. This is actually a really good thing for us to be able to improve our supervision of officers and to have better awareness as we're going into situations, to be able to see live what's happening as we're working together and collaborating on some of those bigger calls. The next one is called Transcribe. That one's also active. That is any body-worn camera recording, and actually any video that comes into our system, we can transcribe it automatically. And of course, then go through and just make sure that clean up any errors or things like that. But that is a huge time-saving and money-saving feature, so we don't have to pay somebody to transcribe our videos in the futures. And then the final one is Dictation. This one is coming in the first quarter of 2022. That is a feature where officers can actually dictate their reports, and then it will do speech to text, and they can paste that into their report, which should improve a lot of the time that it takes for officers to write reports. And that is the 3 things that we were asked to give an update on. And I just wanted to give you a very short introduction to 2 additional technologies. If you go to the next slide, on these next 2, I'm going to go over these very quickly and just give you a really high overview. But we are happy to show you more information or do a more in-depth demo. Both of these are targeted at our 2021 crime control plan overall goal to build community relations and improve our response times. The first one is called Spider Tech, and this is a really exciting program. It integrates with our current systems. It would be a great asset to the police department, the fire department, and 911. We'll be asking for a budget request to try to implement this in the 4th quarter of 2022. Next slide. And just the high end of what it is, when you order anything on Amazon or even when you order a pizza, we're used to immediate communication, verification that the call was received, here's your order number, here's what's happening, and then updates as things move on. Next slide. This would do the same thing for the police department. It's a way that we can help serve the people where they are, the way that they want to be served, and with our limited resources. Next slide. And the way that it works is it connects with our systems that we have in place with dispatch and our records management, and then it automatically generates emails and texts based on events that are configurable to us, and then it delivers those to crime victims and 911 callers. Next slide. And then those that made the call, they get updates if an arrest was made, what their case number is, what detective was assigned, when the case is closed. And it is a great way so that our citizens don't feel like they made a phone call and have been forgotten. They get timely updates. They are frequently updated. So a tremendous technology that I think will be a game changer for our industry. And next slide. And then the final feature of that is that I wanted to talk about today is after we complete a call for service, it also sends the caller a link to do a survey so that we can get immediate feedback and start really working with our citizens of how we can improve service or give accolades for jobs well done. But it's a way we can gather feedback and really get the conversation with our citizens on helping us develop in a way that is beneficial to them. And next slide. The final product that I want to talk about today it's called Case Service. Again, this is a great product that would serve both the police department and 911. We're asking for this as a funding request for our annual budget also, and it would roll out in the fourth quarter of 2022 also. Next slide. This one simply takes incoming calls, and with AI, it can separate out things that need a patrol response versus things that maybe don't need a patrol response. Could be done over the phone or could be done online. So that will really be able to help us speed up our response times to things that really need a response. Next slide. Once those are separated, it takes the things that don't necessarily need a patrol response, and it can use artificial intelligence, voice communication through phone, or the citizens can go through an app or through the web. This is all set up in multiple languages, so it reaches to a large community with numerous languages and numerous ways. So if they don't have access to a smartphone or the web, they can just make a simple telephone call and have a conversation with an artificial intelligence that asks questions and then generates the report for them. And so that would save a large amount of time and be able to help us divert a lot of calls that don't need response times to getting these reports streamlined and into our system for follow-up. Next slide. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions that we have. Otherwise, I'll turn the time back over to you.
Thank you so much. Council members, any questions? I don't see any questions, so thank you for joining us and for this presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think that we have any updates from our racial equity and policing group today. Is that right? Okay, so we will move on to agenda item number 3, which is our budget amendment number 4. We have a good chunk of time set aside for this item so that we can get through the things we need to get through with it. So with this, I will turn the time over to Council Office Policy Analyst Ben Ludke. We also have Chief Financial Officer Mary Beth Thompson here with us as well. So it's all yours, Ben.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is the third briefing for Budget Amendment number 4. The Council held a public hearing on November 16th, closed the hearing, and partially adopted some of the items. Those include A5 and A10. This was the Community Health Access Team, the CHAP program, where firefighters and social workers jointly deploy in response to a call. The Council also approved A6, the Non-Represented Employees Job Salary Survey, and A11 for the Rose Park Golf Course. And then all the items in Section D, which is housekeeping, except D1, which we can get to today, and all the items in Section G, which are the grant awards, as well as I1, which was some reclassifications in the Council office. There are 10 items left in the budget amendment. The Council did discuss some of the community commitment program and the park rangers last month, but since that discussion was cut short and we have a new council member with us today, I was going to review those items as well. The first item I thought we'd start with was E2, the winter shelter support, since the administration sent a revised transmittal. And this was since the staff report was published, so the information in the staff report is now outdated on this item. The revised transmittal is now recommending $400,000 from ARPA. The previous amount was $1 million. The $400,000 would be for police officer voluntary overtime at the temporary winter shelter. They would also include patrols in the surrounding neighborhood. The police department has reached out to other law enforcement agencies to request their police officers also participate in this effort with voluntary overtime. Now, for our police department and other agencies, they've all reported labor shortages for officers. That's part of the reason the request has been made to other agencies to participate if they have the staffing levels to do so. The police department reports the voluntary overtime shifts from earlier this year. About 75% of them are being filled. So even our own overtime, we're not getting 100%. In addition to the $400,000 from the city's ARPA funding, the county would contribute $400,000 as well. So a total budget of $800,000. The council may wish to discuss with the administration whether business assistance should be provided to businesses adjacent to the overflow shelter. And I believe we have Chief Brown and Andrew Johnston available on this item. The police department also sent a one-page infographic talking about how they estimated the total cost for public safety being $816,000. We can put that up on the screen if the council would like to take a look and hear from the chief on that. I'm seeing some nods. Taylor, can you put the infographic up and I'll turn the time over to Chief Brown.
Thank you, Ben. Council, what we were looking at was the last year's airport inn, the overflow shelter. And we looked at the number of calls for service, both at the shelter and in the surrounding neighborhoods. And we ran a timeline from October, November, December, and into January, February, March, and April when the shelter was actually open. So we could see the impact of the calls that we were going on. And there definitely was an increase of calls, not only to the shelter, but also into the surrounding neighborhoods. So with that knowledge and knowing where this new shelter would sit, and that it would be almost twice the size, we estimated that it would probably take about 4 officers in a 5-hour shift, 4 shifts a day, so 20 hours a day, 24/7, to handle the calls and do the work in the surrounding neighborhoods and at the shelter that we've been asked to do. We figured that would be $80 an hour. We incentivized the overtime so that $65 goes to the officer. Each hour, $15 goes back to the agency for the vehicle, fuel, and maintenance. And that equals $1,600 a day times 120 days. So the estimated shelter operation period for those different shifts would be $192,000. Multiply that by 4, takes us to the $816,000, and that also includes a Salt Lake City supervisor with 5 hours worth of supervision each day to make sure that we coordinate with the different agencies that are coming in here, that we know exactly, that we instruct them as to how we want them to work here in the city, what our intent would be, and then help them coordinate the reports and different things that we need to do here as well. So the entire program from start to finish would be $816,000. Now, again, these shifts are voluntary. We're hoping that we will get good participation from the agencies across the valley. I've spoke to most of the chiefs here in the valley, and including the state, Commissioner Anderson, and they've committed that they would put those out to see, which officers will sign up. And then also there are different groups and squads that the state has that could be available in the area during different times, as well as the squads, the bike squads, and things that we have. So that's kind of in a nutshell how we got to the number and what the cost would bear. Any questions?
Council members?
I have one clarification to add, Madam Chair. When I said the total budget is 800,000, and then the chief said the total estimated cost is 816,000, the reason the administration is requesting less than the 816 is because when this was developed, it was anticipated that there'd be a few additional weeks of the temporary shelter operating. Since that is not the case today, that's why slightly less is being requested.
Makes sense. Council members? Councilmember Ferris, will you pull down your mask so we can hear you better?
Sorry, thank you. Can I ask why the shift from the 1 million that we originally promised to 400 today?
Councilmember Ferris, this is Andrew Johnston. The 1 million that the mayor initially proposed was sort of vague, as you remember, for operation, safety, security, a number of things. As we've had negotiations both within the city, obviously, with this council and the mayor, and also talking to the Salt Lake Valley Coalition and state entities, it was clear from the council, we took it as a clear message that safety and security was the top priority, and then mitigation in the area around that, whatever that looked like for businesses, whatever it might be, were the two priorities above, say, operations funding. Since the Coalition and Shelter the Homeless do have still a gap in the operations budget, they still are lacking some money. And the county was willing to work with all of us on safety and security funding for mitigation. It seemed reasonable to have the city and the county contribute towards safety and security as the priority, and then ask the state to contribute for the operations funding needs, so that it really was a multi-jurisdictional cooperation. Now, the other $600,000 as part of that original million, we don't at this time have any recommendation for that, unless the council has some thoughts on how they wanted to utilize that. I'm sure it could be useful in the homeless services system, but we've been careful to convey the council and the mayor's clear preference to ensure that safety and security and mitigation are taken care of first in that area above other needs.
So my understanding is that the state and the county have already contributed to operations, and just to be clear, we are choosing not to, or at least that's the proposal that we have before us, correct?
I don't think that is totally correct, but I do think that Madam Mayor would like to address that question.
Thank you.
We haven't been asked for the money. So it's on the table, and they haven't asked for any money.
Okay.
And our priorities are, as Andrew stated, to keep the city and the neighborhood safe and the businesses safe. So we're using the money for those purposes. And although we didn't want to have any Salt Lake City PD consumed in this process, the reality with the limitations that Ben mentioned in departments far beyond our borders is such that we all kind of need to chip in. So this is a bit of a negotiation, and I feel good about it. But they could ask.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Other questions? Vice Chair Borton?
Yeah, so the if there were another 600,000 that's on the table, we'd just leave that where it is for now.
It would be unappropriated ARPA funding, so it would be sitting there pending a future budget opening.
Okay, and we only, and it's in the same, like we don't have to use that money any faster than we do the other ARPA funds that we're getting.
Correct.
Okay, so same. Okay.
All ARPA is by the end of 2024, it needs to be spent.
Great, thank you.
And so we don't have to specifically set this aside into a separate account. In the meantime, it'll just be chilling.
Sits in an unappropriated account.
It just basically goes back to the ARPA funds that we have sitting there, and when the mayor comes back with another proposal or an idea, or the council does, then we can have that discussion. And I think that it may go to the overflow shelter, right? It may go, those are all, that 600,000 is still just sitting there saying, let's have some more discussion about it. Because as the mayor mentioned, that with this new proposal, and as Andrew mentioned, I think it's the recognition that, number one, Salt Lake City police officers are going to be out there anyway. I mean, it's just the reality of it, right?
Absolutely.
And number two, we know that what we want is to make sure that the surrounding area, not the campus itself, but the surrounding area is safe, and the community is safe, and the people within the community are safe, and businesses. And so I think from my discussions, and Andrew and Madam Mayor can certainly jump in, with my discussions with them is this, they did kind of part of what we asked to be done, which is go out to other entities and say, we need your help here. And the county's willing to put forth that $400,000. And so I think this proposal came out of that, of saying the $600,000 can still sit there and have that discussion for other mitigating things. I mean, at this point, just about anything. But that right now, that $400,000 is necessary so that we can accomplish the goal of keeping the area safe for everyone. And if I misspoke in any way, I'm happy to have somebody jump in and tell me to shut up.
I'd love to advocate for that $600,000 to be permanently allocated towards some sort of community rehabilitative things on the west side that have resulted, whatever's left over.
Madam Chair, so I think that brings a question. So for those funds, Ben asked a question, or encouraged us to ask a question about what's going to happen to the businesses surrounding this new shelter, or the business that is there at the shelter. How is economic development going to mitigate any impacts on these businesses? And I'm not sure if there's anybody to talk about that.
I'm not sure if Director Collender is with us right now. I know that they've reached out and spoken to the business at the shelter.
Apparently, Rachel.
I believe Ben is on the line now.
Oh, great.
Yes, hi, council members. Great to be here with you. To answer the question about the needs of the business, there is some ambiguity as to if the business will be relocated or remain on the site. And that's a negotiation between the property owner and the operator right now, and what's going to be best for the business. There are options to consider for financing that could provide contingencies there, and we could provide that recommendation. I'm looking to Rachel and the mayor if we're providing that recommendation or receiving that from council. But the short is there's a variety of scenarios for the local business there, and some flexibility on mitigating the situation for the local business is necessary.
Thanks, Ben. Can you be a little bit more specific of what the businesses can expect, the business or businesses can expect from us? Because when you say flexibility, I don't understand what it means. Is it flexibility in funding, flexibility in staff time? I don't know.
If I can jump in, Ben, sorry, I'm going to jump in real quick. And I don't mean to answer this question for you, but I think that is part of the discussion that we haven't had yet of what people could expect. And something that I think needs to sort of it's somewhat of an internal conversation, just so that we can define what those parameters look like and how and what. And Rachel is here, so and looked like she wanted to say something, so I'm going to turn it over to Rachel real quick and then back to Ben.
Thanks. I was just going to say essentially what you said, which is we'd love to have a more thorough conversation with you about businesses that might be adjacent, how far you might want to extend such potential assistance, whether that would extend to businesses in the area of other HRCs, or if it's limited to a temporary winter shelter. There's a lot of programs that are, or there's potentially some programs that are already built that we could allocate funding to more specifically, but I think we should have a more thorough conversation about what we're looking for here.
All right, thank you. And then another question, one more question, is about this $400,000 that the county has committed. Do we have that somewhere in writing? Is it for sure? How do we know that that commitment will be there throughout this temporary shelter?
My understanding is that the city and the county have completed a contract for the $400,000 for the temporary shelter.
All right, that's awesome. Thanks.
Go ahead. Thank you. I don't know if it's too premature, but I would be interested. I guess I'll just propose it, and you can vote no. A straw poll that and I think we're all in agreement, but to show that we want to use this 600,000 for either businesses or other community-centered things in the area immediately adjacent to the shelter. So I don't necessarily want to like put it in a separate account or anything yet, because I also don't want us to necessarily be limited to 600,000. But yeah, while we have those conversations, I'd like to make sure that we have something in our minds that we're not just going to roll this back into all the other ARPA money and use it for some other project. So I would propose that we, tentatively designate at least 600,000 for community-based activities in that area.
Council members, I have a straw poll on the table. Yeah, is there discussion? Councilmember Ferris?
I just would it be possible to stipulate that we ensure that this project, the shelter project, is at least fully funded first, and then anything remaining goes towards that sort of setup?
Oh yeah, I'm intending that this would, yes. The answer.
Then I'm absolutely all for it.
Could I ask it?
Because we certainly need to make sure that this project is going to be fully funded enough to be successful so that it doesn't create way too many ramifications already in the neighborhood that we just have to pay to mitigate anyway.
Cindy, go ahead.
Just a question to ask the council. There are conversations going on with the state, and the thought originally was that the city would only put in money if the state and county contributed, and the county is involved. The state, of course, takes a longer time. If you put a condition on this money that the program, we use that until the program is fully funded, then you're really taking city resources and filling a gap that is maybe not the city's to fill, since the program is statewide, the homelessness issue is statewide. So I don't know how to phrase what you're trying to accomplish, but I just want to share that one worry. I don't know how to fix it though.
Well, in my mind, what I was proposing wasn't exclusive of what you're saying. Like, if we end up having to use some of this for operations, okay. But I just don't want to. The point of the straw poll is to say we're not going to use the 600,000 for some other ARPA eligible idea.
So that at the very least, this $1 million will stay in that very specific neighborhood.
Well, the 600,000, the 400,000 we're already going to spend, but we know yes. So functionally, yes. But just to be clear, for anybody that may be watching at home and the many people we have here in the audience, that it wouldn't be $1 million, like where that number is coming from, and that's the 600,000.
Yeah.
And I think it's important too that for the members of the community that are watching, to understand that we're trying to take those steps. That is part of the promise that we made at the last meeting. And so I think, having this vote, even though we're not quite sure exactly how we're going to spend it, to do this straw poll is important for the community. I know you agree. I know Councilmember Petro Eschler agrees. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Andrew.
I apologize for interjecting. Some time frame issues may be helpful at this point for you all. From the state funding perspective, they really don't have the ability. They'd have to go through their normal process through the State Homelessness Council and then through the Executive Appropriations Committee to do this. Therefore, the earliest that state money could be sort of open for operations of the overflow would be January, maybe into February, somewhere in there. It may not influence your planning process here, but just so you're aware that it's probably not going to happen between now and then, just based on their meeting schedules and other stressors. And then obviously in February, the legislature convenes, so it could be an interesting timing issue in the spring depending on if there's money or not for that operations out there.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, council members, I have a straw poll on the table that I'm going to sort of repeat and hope that I get it right, and that is the straw poll from Vice Chair Wharton supporting $600,000 be used in community activities in the area and community adjacent to the overflow shelter. Is that accurate? Okay, council members, show your feelings. I have all thumbs up. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next items. Please,
So
Ben.
that takes us to A12. This is the Park Ranger Pilot Program.
So, Ben, I'm going to interrupt you because I feel like interrupting people today, apparently. Can we actually sort of talk about like E3, 4, 5, 6, 7, no, 8 all together?
So the Park Ranger Program and the Community Commitment Program, they both have multiple items that are all related. And I believe those are the ones you called out.
I want to talk about both of those things together because I think that they relate to one another. And while we may need to go through them individually, I would like for us to sort of frame this as these alternative response models that we have been talking about and how they sort of work together. There's several different response models that we have funded or are looking at funding, but they kind of, I was telling Ben this earlier, it sort of is like spokes of a wheel for me, and these are all the different spokes of that wheel. So I think if we kind of frame that, even though we may talk about them individually, but frame that conversation that way, it might be a little bit more helpful for us in the community.
So stepping back, looking at the big picture, it has been a priority of the City Council pretty much for the last 18 months to expand, diversify the response options when someone's calling 911. And right now, I see 6 of those alternative response options. So the Park Ranger Program being one of them, the Community Commitment Program being another, including the Rapid Intervention Team that's proposed in this budget amendment. There's also the Social Worker Program, which the Council doubled the staffing of as part of the annual budget. There's the Community Health Access Team, the CHAT team, which you approved last month, where the firefighters and social workers jointly deploy. There is the Crisis Intervention Team, or CIT, where a police officer and a social worker jointly respond. And then, as was recently announced by the police department in the updated 2021 crime control plan, they're developing a civilian responder option for those lower priority calls for service. So that's 6 options right there. And something that staff has heard in discussions with council members and members of the public is trying to understand how all of these fit together, because they each have a specialty. Some have geographic areas of focus. They each have different hours of operation, which will continue to evolve based on staffing levels and availability. But having that higher level, almost like a graphic or a chart where you can put all of them together and say, these are all of the alternative response options available when you call 911 in Salt Lake City, and here's how it fits the different types of calls for service. So we don't have that graphic today, but we've heard from some of you that you're really interested in it. I'm seeing more nods, so I think it's helpful for staff to know, but also the administration to know that this is a communication tool for the public, as well as for the council to be able to see that higher level multi-year effort.
Thank you, Ben. And I think that that is true. I would sort of look to the administration. I know that is something that in my discussion earlier with Lisa Schaefer that has been talked about in some of these meetings of just that overall graphic. I think it is a helpful tool for us and for our constituents to understand, especially because this has been such a priority in this diversified model of responses. And I have to say, after we approved these 8 things here today, that I'm pretty dang proud of it, right? Because we really are doing what we said we would do and say, let's look at what the community needs and how to respond to it and still be supportive of our first responders. So, oh, hey, Lisa, you're up on the big screen. So we were just talking about that graphic and that communication tool of all of the different response models that I'm hoping you and your staff can work with Ben and our staff in kind of creating something that could be publicly outward facing so that we have that tool to explain all of the good work that we're doing here in the city for those different alternative models.
Yeah, thank you, Council Chair. I don't have anything really to add to that other than to just say, thank you for the collaboration. And thank you to the council members and staff members of the council who have met with us to discuss these various programs. And we do recognize that with this great progress that we're making, and I am proud of it as well, Council Chair Fowler, I'm super proud of the fact that we're being responsive to the community, we're being responsible to the council, we're being responsive to the matrix audit, we're being responsive to the Racial Equity and Policing Commission in all of the ways that they have asked us to respond. And very proud of that. And I'm here to answer any questions, but just wanted to say thank you. And yes, the suggestion to put all of that into one graphic is a good one. And we will work on that definitely in conjunction with council staff.
Thank you. And so I guess, Ben and council members, if we want to turn back to those line by line items and see I think if we just do kind of a brief overview and then see if there's questions on each of those.
Sure.
Thanks.
So the proposed Park Ranger pilot program, it would be $1.6 million from general fund balance and $69,000 from ARPA. And this is related to an item in section C to pay for it. The Treasury Guidance allows the city to reimburse general fund balance for the hiring freeze that occurred last fiscal year. So it's taking ARPA money, reimbursing the general fund, and then that new general fund money is being used to pay for the Park Ranger program. And this is necessary because the Park Ranger program itself is not eligible for ARPA funding. The benefit is this is a creative funding approach. The difficulty is in future fiscal years, next year and the year after, the city could again use this approach to reimburse the general fund, but it won't fully cover the cost in future years. It's about an $800,000 funding gap next fiscal year if you were to approve this staffing level. So the staffing level that's proposed, 19 FTEs. And this is a mixture of 2 sergeants. I believe it's 16 rangers, yes, 16 rangers and 1 support position. The Public Lands Department would house this new program. They stated at a minimum 12 rangers would be needed in order to start the program, but they're recommending the higher number, 19 FTEs, because they want to do a larger program. The program's going to be focused in specific geographic areas that correspond to where the highest calls for service occur in the city's green open spaces. This is Jordan Park and the Jordan River Parkway, Fairmont Park, Liberty Park, and Pioneer Park. The rangers would stay at existing city facilities near and inside these parks. This would include the soon-to-be redeveloped Fisher Mansion Carriage House. They may use temporary trailers in the meantime where needed. The rangers would not operate in the foothills or the outlying areas. It's very much focused in the urban residential areas of the city for their operations. They would operate from 8 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week. The rangers would be unarmed. They would not go through the same training and certification as a police officer. The administration stated they could have a limited law enforcement role, but they would not have the legal law enforcement authority or weapons of a police officer. So there are instances where a park ranger may come upon a situation or respond to a complaint, but then need to call for a police officer response in most criminal matters. The total cost is about $2.4 million next fiscal year. What you're being asked to approve today is $1.6 million. This is $1.2 million for the salaries of the 19 FTEs and $400,000 for one-time costs. And the one-time costs are 3 trucks and 2 light response vehicles. So that funding would go to the fleet fund. The other thing I wanted to show is, Taylor, can you put the table at the bottom of page 11 up on the screen? The table shows the overtime that the Public Lands Department has been paying for police officers to go and work in parks. And what you'll see is in fiscal year 18, they only did this for 4 months. It was $63,000. And then the following year, it significantly increased. It was 7 months where they used overtime pay for police officers, and it was almost $250,000. And then the last 2 fiscal years, it almost dropped to 0 because of the staffing challenges in the police department. There just weren't the officers available to take these overtime shifts. So recognizing that challenge, they shifted to hiring a private security firm to lock bathrooms and do nighttime patrols. But instead of that approach, they would like to do the park ranger program. So whether the program exists or not, there are costs and needs at night and for safety concerns in our parks. A couple of policy questions if the council wanted to talk about the effectiveness of the rangers in responding to criminal issues in parks, and how this program would coordinate with the existing Parks Bike Squad that the police department already operates. And I think it's important to note that the Parks Bike Squad, I think it has the same target areas of parks as the Park Ranger program would have. Other questions are, if you'd like to ask the administration for the pros and the cons of using the park rangers versus the private security, if there's a mixture of the two, or if one is clearly preferred over the other. If the Racial Equity and Policing Commission has reviewed this proposal, and then what equipment would be provided to the park rangers. As I stated, they would be unarmed, but I'm not sure what other equipment and tools they would be provided with. And then the last question, when and how the pilot program's staffing level would be reviewed to determine if fewer or more rangers are needed to meet the community need.
Great. Thank you, Ben, for that. Council members, questions on this item? Councilmember Wharton.
Yes. I understand the crimes that are occurring in parks and this filling that need. But we'd also talked about this program as being as including the Foothill Trails program or the Foothill Trails in the past. So would there be a program, or would there be a plan to, implementing it at the parks now, but with an eye towards expanding it into the foothills, or what's the reason for not including that now, especially if we're going to do the additional officers?
I see Kristen popped up on the big screen, so I will turn that time over to hopefully answer that question. Kristen.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. Thanks for having me today. The Foothills would be an expansion to this program. The Foothills, as you know, are owned by multiple different landowners, the U.S. Forest Service, private property owners, the University of Utah, and the Latter-day Saints Church, as well as public utilities. So there are quite a few different landowners up there. So yes, we would love to do that. At this time, this proposal doesn't include that expansive of a reach. We were primarily looking at the crime rates that are happening in our parks and looking to help mitigate some of those issues that are happening in our parks.
Thank you. Chris, did you have any follow-up on that? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I just didn't know.
You're fine. Not right now. Thank you.
Other council members? Councilmember Valdemoros?
I have a question on the park ranger. So I'm sorry if I missed this, Ben, but this 19 FTEs, I understand there will be split in certain parks or certain high demand park for park rangers, but will they be walking around? Will they be driving around? Are they going to be stationed? Is this just for safety, or is it also for information from people that may have questions? I don't know.
All of the above.
Okay.
The way the department has described it is part of the reason they need the trucks is because they would be moving around the parks, but they would also be on foot patrols, but they would also have specific spots that they may station at for a while. But the intent is to not only focus on criminal issues, but also general rules and civility in the park, as well as providing information, education, if visitors are looking for directions, if they want to know more history about the park, things along those lines.
Awesome. That's awesome. And then the other question is, how much does this program cost? Like, if I understand there's a one-time cost right now for certain things, and then the FTEs, but beyond these funds that we have right now, how much would it cost the city to keep this program every year? And are there any proposals on how we're going to make that money up to pay, if we wanted to continue this program? Where is that money going to come from?
So the total cost estimated for next fiscal year, all 12 months, $2.4 million. The approach where ARPA reimburses the general fund for the hiring freeze would cover about $1.5 million of that. But that leaves you with an $800,000 funding gap in the annual budget. Exactly how that would be balanced would be determined in developing the mayor's recommended budget, unless the administration has ideas that they wanted to share now.
Not right now, okay. Great. I think I had one more thing was, I forgot, but thank you. Thank you for now.
Thank you.
Dan?
Thanks, Ben. Back to the question from Councilmember Valdemoros about the funding side of the House. So the gross expense is $2.5 million, but we also have to realize that we're not going to be paying for the private security firm. And would also hopefully, I mean, with the advent of this program, the desire is that we'd be reducing some of the overtime from the police department and also reducing the calls to service time. So there would be could be a savings with that out of that 2.5 annual cost to the program, or is that already baked into it?
I think the savings would be operational savings, where police officers, instead of being diverted to issues in parks, they would instead be able to focus on more serious calls for service. But I don't think there would be a dollar savings to the general fund.
It wouldn't be a savings in overtime cost to the, I know it's operational cost, but the mayor's got her hand up.
The amount that was spent last year, I think it was only $9,000.
Well, that's because there wasn't the officers to take those calls. So I'm thinking general overall overtime costs.
But those overtime officers were used as there was a specific program that was for security in the parks. So yes, I do believe it would be a savings for that $233,000 or whatever it was a few years ago.
I'll also say, thanks for giving me a chance. It's harder. Being online is easier to raise my hand, but that Councilmember, with one of the recent actions we've taken with the new revised crime control plan to open up overtime shifts and advertise for positions for call diversion for officers to take those calls and fill out those case numbers without deploying a patrol officer. We've seen they did over 700 calls in just the first couple of weeks that they were active. We know that there's a call reduction benefit. We can't attribute all of the call reduction time to that, but it's a pretty obvious improvement. So to say that there's going to be a direct fund or a direct general fund improvement on that, perhaps we could extrapolate that, but really there are other benefits that I know you know, but just to give you a really recent example with the call diversion model that's working so well.
Thank you, Mary. That was kind of, I appreciate that very much, because that's kind of my point here, is that the Ranger program has a lot of benefits, along with the other 5 other, the chat, the CIT, the community commitment program. All those have great benefits across the city that will help offset the cost of the program in general.
Madam Chair, if I wanted to chime in at the beginning of the item, but I didn't, and I just wanted to say thanks to the way Ben's characterized this and Lisa, that what we're doing with this suite of, it's a big budget amendment, and I know that. I'm sorry for the weight of it, but I'm excited by what we can take on, because instead of the city showing up with
a standard size Phillips head screwdriver to fix every issue that's out there. Some people need to replace a watch battery. Some people need to take a tree down. Some people need to pry open a can. And we're finally making that Swiss Army knife, so to speak, and being able to show up to calls and serve people better and really at the bottom line, improve quality of life across the city. And so that's kind of what this package of the budget amendment and definitely the park ranger program is a part of. And there's a time urgency with the park rangers in particular that we feel urgent about, so that come summer of 2022, we can have park rangers in the parks instead of potentially having to wait until next winter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, Dan?
And Ben, just to reiterate, the policy questions that you asked earlier on, I'm all in favor of getting some answers for those. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Unless the administration wants to jump in on those, we'll follow up in email. Okay.
Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you. Do we know what the calls that we're currently receiving to police are for, say, Ensign Peak and things like that? Because my guess is that those would also be very high. And so can we get that data and information so that we can look at that? Because I know that I get a lot of information from constituents who are calling the police for those locations and for the other, the trailhead on 18th Avenue. And I'm just wondering how those compare to the other calls for police backup that we're getting at other parks.
We received a list of calls for service by park, but I don't see the foothills or natural areas included in there, so I think we would need to make that new request for the PD to run the numbers.
Yeah, because I guess what I'm getting at and what I've been thinking of since my last question is that, you know, in trying to reduce the burden that is on police, a lot of what, you know, what I'm telling my constituents is that, you know, because the resources are stretched so thin, that's why, you know, they're not getting call and responses to these. And some of them are nuisance issues, but a lot of them are, I think, really legitimate safety issues, especially when you get activity up there that could put, like, large groups of people that are, you know, could be a fire hazard or something like that. And I think that when there's no response at all, when residents call about these things, you know, it's even more frustrating because we know that's a dangerous area in terms of the wildlife-urban interface. So I would like to know, you know, if it's not going to be that we're going to service these areas with park rangers, then does that mean that the burden we're going to relieve on them having to respond to these other parks is going to result in them having a faster response time to these trailhead areas when residents call?
Can I say something to that? I think one of the conversations that I had, I think it was today with the mayor and Lisa, and is, so I fully support the park ranger program and have since we were very first on the council. But one of the things that we talked about is that this program is in some ways still being built. And so I think this feedback is important for the administration, because I don't think that it's necessarily like this is set in stone. This is like these park rangers shall only go to these places. But my understanding, and I'll point to Lisa and Kristen on this, is that like they want to continue having this feedback and this conversation to make this program better. I mean, it is a pilot program, which I think the whole point of that is to kind of continue tweaking it where we see something that needs to be fixed, or not tweak it if it's working out, right? But I just kind of wanted, that was the conversation I had with Lisa earlier. I don't know if Lisa or Kristen want to address that as well.
Sure. Council Chair Fowler, I'd be happy to hop in here. Yes, one of the issues with being as responsive as the council has been, and certainly as this administration has been to our many requests for alternate response models. One of the challenges with that is we are building a lot of pretty complex programs, and we're doing that in a short amount of time. So what we've proposed seems manageable to us as a pilot, but the feedback is definitely hearing it, right? And I think that you know, it's not as simple as maybe allocating money to add more rangers to a program that we haven't entirely built yet. I think it would be very prudent of us to take a look at those calls for service, to see what kinds of service calls we're getting, to give the pilot program a few months where we analyze the data and see what we get back, and then talk about expanding. But I do appreciate the feedback and definitely hear the concern. And I, to your point, Councilmember Wharton, I think that the intent here is to reduce the calls for service to our police department to those that are most urgent. And we're working very, very closely with Dispatch 911, our fire partners, and our police department partners to make sure that we're addressing those things all together holistically, with the intent that reduction in calls for service that our police department needs to respond to will be targeted to those areas where they need those police officers the most urgently. And if that ends up being on a trail, Ensign Peak, wherever it is, and that it seems like that this would benefit that as well. I don't know if I answered your question, but I just wanted to chime in that we are, it's a challenge. We're building complex programs right now, and a pilot time, I think, would be prudent.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. I just want to, Lisa, you and I have talked about these sort of ongoing issues, and Kristen too, that, you know, these areas that are happening at these trailheads, or sorry, the activities that are happening at these trailheads, which some, you know, does include some criminal activity, but part of why I've been such a big supporter of the Park Ranger program is because we talked about that as a possible solution to some of these things that we're seeing. And I want to go forward with the program 100%. I would support it either way, but I don't want that part of the conversation to be lost, especially because we're not anticipating any fewer people going up to these trailheads. We're not anticipating any fewer problems happening. And if these neighborhoods are going to welcome people from all over the city, and, you know, or even further, you know, to come in and come access the trails, and, you know, where these trails belong to everybody, not just the people who live near them, but that we're also going to make sure that the neighborhoods are going to remain safe when people are there and doing things that they shouldn't be doing up in the foothills, and then putting those neighborhoods at risk of fire or other activity that is above nuisance and really goes to you know, public health or safety in those communities.
Yeah, I appreciate that, council member, very much. And I did also want to sort of reiterate that the Park Ranger program that we're designing, the Rangers themselves will not be armed. And so some of the things that you're talking about would definitely require a police response anyway. And so we're coordinating that through the police department and through dispatch. Definitely appreciate the conversation, though.
Thank you. Council Member Petro Eschler.
Do we have any ideas what the qualifications are for who will hire to be these park rangers? Like, I think another impact that I haven't seen quantified here is this could be an amazing workforce development, especially for recruiting West High graduates who, you know, might be kinesthetic learners and might be more eager for something, you know, to start their careers. Do we have any idea who we're targeting?
We've requested job descriptions, which would state the qualifications, minimum and preferred. We have not yet received the job description, so I don't know.
And I'm assuming things like multiculturalism and multilinguistic talents will be highly valued and an asset when trying to build this workforce.
Okay, we'll reiterate the request and see if HR has got a job description to share.
And Lisa is giving us a thumbs up. And so all of those target items would be administrative. So when you see the job description, it'll be quite generic, but the administration can tailor and recruit.
I'm in love with this program, and there are so many young people I know on the west side who would be amazing at this, and I'd love to really see us target these dollars to develop that workforce and these young people.
So, Ben, before you go on, council members, we are almost to the time that we had allocated for this agenda item. And we've hit 2 of the several on here. So this brings me to a very important point in that the mayor brought up and that I think we can recognize. There are some, the park ranger program, the rapid response program, the community commitment program, all of these things that have been on this budget amendment and that in one way or another we've been discussing are in some ways time sensitive in that we want to get people hired and we want to get this money allocated. And so at least that's my goal. I like these programs. I would like to get this money allocated. And so this is set for a vote either, I mean, really any time we decide we want to vote on it, but I was hoping that if not this week, then next week, that we could get this done before the end of the year. So I just sort of wanted to throw out my intention there. People don't have to agree with me, but that was certainly my intention. So I'm wondering if in these, with the next couple of items, if we can just throw up the staff report and kind of walk through very quickly. We don't need to go through what is written on the staff report, but sort of go through them, star them, and then if there are questions that pop out as we're looking at them, then we can ask those questions. And kind of, if not, we can just move on so that these have been good discussions, but we literally have only gotten through 2 budget items.
So Taylor, I'm pretty sure you have the staff report, and we are on item C2. I think it's page 13. So this is the first of 4 items that are all related to the Community Commitment Program. This one is for a rapid intervention team. It's $165,000 from ARPA. Now that's only partial year funding. The full amount for next fiscal year would be $263,000. So this is another item that could increase the funding gap in the next annual budget. It would be for 3 new FTEs. They would be in the Sustainability Department. They would be supervised by the Homeless Engagement Coordinator in CAN. There's a question about why they're in a department that's separate from their supervisor. I haven't heard a response from the administration on that yet. The intent is to maximize the city's partnership with the health department. So these 3 employees would be dedicated to going out and working with the health department, as well as dealing with illegal dumping and similar issues in the public right-of-way, as well as the community commitment programs cleanup efforts.
Ben, how much in the next fiscal year would the funding gap on this one be?
So it's $263,000 is the amount that would need to be put into the next annual budget. $263,000.
Thank you.
So that takes us to D1. This is a request to reappropriate $100,000 from the Economic Development Loan Fund. Now, the council previously appropriated these dollars, and it was in Budget Amendment 7 last spring. But the Economic Development Department wasn't able to use any of the funds because they were supposed to be for forgivable loans, but that loan program doesn't allow forgivable loans, so they weren't able to use it. So this request is to take the $100,000, remove it from the Economic Development Loan Fund, and then have it dispersed as grants to businesses. It's focused on outdoor dining and retail. So it would be $5,000 for outdoor dining or $10,000 for an open street event. The reason we're bringing this to you is if you would prefer to wait to act on this item when the department has specific guidelines for the program that you can review, or if you're comfortable making the shift now knowing those guidelines are being developed.
One thing that we have been noticing is there are some delegations of authority, particularly to economic development, and they don't always include the policy language that is standard in terms of the amount of framework that you as the policy-making body would give. So you could always appropriate this and say that it's pending receipt of the criteria so that you can weigh in on the criteria. But absent having some sort of policy weigh in on the specifics, I would suggest that you wait just so that we don't get further into the delegations without addressing that issue.
Council members, any questions on that one? Then you can keep going.
So that's E1. This is a request for $2 million from ARPA as local matching funds to a state grant. The request is $10 million from the state.
Did we already adopt that one?
Nope. This one has not been voted on.
Oh, I thought we had. We did what?
There are different steps. So when the grant was applied for, there was a public hearing, but actually approving the city's match of $2 million, that is still pending your action.
Oh, in my head, we had already done this.
We are waiting from the state to hear if they're going to award it or not. This is
going back. So if we're waiting on the state to see if they're going to award it, do we need to allocate this before or after? Wouldn't it make sense to wait till after we know we have to match it?
Have some information. Can you hear me? We have some information. They came back and asked us some additional questions, and so we answered those additional questions, but they have accepted. We just don't have a final award document at this time yet.
So we could leave this off of this budget amendment. Like, let's say we voted on things today or next week. We could leave this off and wait and vote on it then, because if now that my memory is coming back to me, we indicated our support of allocating this so that the state could say, okay, we know that the city's in, and we felt comfortable putting in the grant application. The department felt comfortable putting that in, right?
Correct.
But at this point, we could potentially wait until we find out if it's awarded to us to then allocate those matching dollars.
We could.
If there's no other questions on that, it takes us to E5. This is, again, the Community Commitment Program. It's $161,000 for vehicles. So the 3 new FTEs was the previous item on this topic. This is the vehicles for those 3 new employees. It'd be 2 F-350 pickup trucks and a trailer. And E6 is also the Community Commitment Program, but this one is $1.5 million from ARPA for police officer overtime to support the program. So this would be specific to the homeless encampment cleanup and camp reestablishment stabilization efforts. The administration estimates there'd be 14 major cleanups and 122 minor cleanups and the area stabilization. And an important point, the council added $650,000 in the annual budget for police officer overtime to support the community commitment program. The police department has spent all of that $650,000 as of October, and they've also spent a couple $100,000 of their general overtime budget. So we're a third of the way through the fiscal year, and the department has spent over half of the overtime budget. So this additional $1.5 million is expected to be enough for the department to get through the end of the fiscal year without returning for another overtime budget increase.
Thanks, Ben. Any questions on that?
So that takes us to E8. This is the last of the Community Commitment Program items. It's $57,000 from ARPA for additional cleanings by Advantage Services. The annual budget included $777,000 for clean neighborhood efforts. This would be in addition to that. Two questions, if the council is interested, is would this additional funding change the use from limited to public cleaning, or if private property could also be cleaned in some instances? The other question is the administration indicated that ARPA for cleanings is expected to increase 5-fold next year from $57,000 to $290,000. And if the council would like to learn more about what changes to those cleaning services are being planned.
Council members, questions on this? Okay.
So we've got two more.
Okay, we can do it.
E9, this is $4 million from ARPA for the West Side Community Initiative. This is creating a new perpetual housing fund for the West Side, defined as west of I-15. The RDA had a separate briefing back in September on this topic, so I wasn't planning on going into the details since there was already a discussion on it. The RDA is planning to come back early next year with a refined policy for the board's consideration and ultimate adoption. So this $4 million would go into a holding account pending the RDA board's approval of a policy for the program. And then long term, the Inland Port Authority's jurisdictional land has a set aside for housing, which would go into and provide the ongoing funding source long term for the program.
Council members?
How did you craft something so amazing? That's my only question.
Team effort, that's how. And then the last item, this is E10. It's a proposal to take $4 million from ARPA for nonprofit and business assistance community grants. Now it's split into two parts. $2 million for business assistance, which would be overseen by the Economic Development Department, and $2 million for nonprofit assistance, which would be overseen by the CAN Department. Now there is some additional workload in providing grants because each grant would have to comply with the reporting and federal monitoring, and this is going to involve some interpretation of the guidance from the Treasury Department, which is a bit of a moving target. We're still waiting for the final guidance from them about how to use ARPA. So it would be the Finance Department and the Attorney's Office that would need to look at every single application to determine if it is an eligible use or not, or if there are additional questions. And then once an application is funded, there would be continued oversight and reporting and compliance to make sure they stay within that eligibility space. Now, if this is funded, there would be an ad hoc committee or two. It wasn't quite clear at the time of the staff report. So the process would be submit your applications in an open and competitive process. There would be an ad hoc committee with representatives from CAN and the Economic Development Department, members of the mayor's office, the council office, and some members of to be determined city boards and commissions who would form this ad hoc grant application review committee. That committee would ask questions, score, and ultimately determine who gets awarded the funds. So this is a delegation of authority from the council to this ad hoc committee. And this is one of the policy questions is, does the council want to use this approach, or would you prefer to use the existing city process such as CIP, CDBG, and the one-time CARES Act grants the city received last year? That process has the resident advisory board that every year reviews HUD grants and CIP. It would have them review the application since they are familiar with this kind of assistance to nonprofits and to businesses. They would then make funding recommendations that go to the mayor after having open meetings for the public where they ask questions. The mayor has a separate set of funding recommendations, so both funding recommendations go to the council. The council would hold a public hearing, would deliberate, and then make the final funding determinations. So the delegation of authority or using the existing process is a question for the council on this funding.
Yes, Cindy.
And it could sound like an interminable process, but it does not have to be long. It doesn't have to take a long time. The first 2/3 of that process have to take place anyway. So the question is, at the end, do you want it to come through the mayor to you so that you can have a public hearing and a vote on it? Or are you comfortable with a staff committee doing that? So that's a second delegation of authority question that relates to the first one that I raised with you.
As a nonprofit professional, I want the people who we deem needing this to get it as quickly and as effectively as possible. So I feel comfortable delegating that. My other question exists around criteria. When I met with economic development for my orientation, they had very, very clear data on how this is an uneven recovery from the pandemic. So not all nonprofits are created the same, totally showing my background here, understanding which elements are not recovering as quickly. Will we be able to weight in rubrics those from sectors who are not recovering as quickly as part of an equity consideration?
You would be, if you were deciding. You can ask the administration to do that, or you can adopt it as a condition, but that's part of your policy-making role. So you can delegate that partially or entirely.
Mary Beth?
So one of the things that the administration has talked about is, with CARES, we had to spend money very, very quickly. And with that has come some significant hardship for the finance department. Specifically over the last 3 weeks, trying to come up with invoices. So one of the things that we have done is we've created a template that goes down and creates the projects pertaining to the FRF guidelines and the Treasury guidelines that we have to report up to, because federal grants are very strict. So we want to walk through that process, and we will be walking through that process with CAN and Economic Development before it goes to a grant process. So we ensure that we are meeting those requirements before we move forward.
So just a clarification, I mean, right now, our grants come to the city council, right?
Your grant, when you apply for grants, there is a transparency piece that comes to the council. But when you allocate grant money, typically that would come to the council. It does with CDBG, Hopwa Home, all of those. But it's up to you how much you delegate in terms of the other things.
I mean, I see Rachel here. Give me one. Dan?
Thank you. So, look, it clarified for me, we have a program, CIP program. It goes through a board review. They grade it. The mayor's office makes a recommendation. We approve it, and the system is ongoing. And I see this something similar to that, and I'd like to keep the approval process with the city council and not just a board. So is that, am I reading it correctly? We would be giving the board the authority to allocate the money without going through us. Okay. This board, not the staff of board. Oh, it's a committee of staff people, but different from the board, but it's still a committee of staff people vice the city council. And I just would like to keep that authority with us, but go through the same process we do with the CIP. So kind of like a question and a opinion.
I think I missed your question. I got the opinion part, which I agree with.
The question was the board staff would be delegating that authority to them.
Right, so it would skip the final, my understanding, and somebody can correct me, but from what I'm hearing is this would essentially skip the final step that we have in HOPWA, CDBG, CIP, right, where we would get the recommendation, we'd have a big book and have to go through it and decide yes or no or whatever. Yeah. It would skip that step. It would delegate it to this ad hoc committee or some other committee.
And it would skip the board step also. technically, I suppose you could say it skips the mayor's step, although the folks mostly work for the mayor, so she, could have her input, I would imagine, but.
Okay. Anna?
So,
Sorry, Dan, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, just, so it would also skip the public process, because right now it goes through the public process for CIP.
Yes, that scares me.
right.
Yeah, that's part, okay.
So what I understand is option one is we do this just as we do CIP, CDBG. There's a process already. We have the final say. Or we delegate to a new group and then they have the final say.
Well said.
But that group is entirely staff. There's no public input on that.
Right. So,
Right.
and that's I know it might take us more time, but it's not, sometimes it's nice to hear groups. When we do CDBG and we do CIP, we have a public process where people call in and say, hey, I really want to advocate for this project because X, Y, and Z. It seems like this is also, it could be that way. I would like to go that way.
Okay. Rachel, did you have some input that you wanted to? You came up here, so I'll give you you walked up here. Might as well give you the
Sorry,
microphone.
I'm just going to butt in by walking up here. Just to be clear, I don't think we've tried to build any specific process that would cut out the community. This really, we were trying to build the idea of the grants in order to be responsive to community groups who have been coming to all of us, I think, saying, hey, we know the city has a lot of rescue plan funds. What are you doing with them? And how do we apply? So we're trying to be responsive to that. We're trying to make sure that we get the money out into the community sooner than later. But also, to Mary Beth's point and to all of your points, we need to do it correctly and with the right amount of oversight and community input. So what Mary Beth described as making sure that first we're able to really scope this in a way that fits within the specific federal guidelines, I think really narrows, how people will apply for it kind of right off the bat and what projects would be eligible. As we've worked through this over the last month or so, since we first submitted the proposal or idea to you, we've talked about trying to get an internal focus group together of staff and council staff to where we can work through together what the process would be. That would be, comfortable for the council, comfortable for the administration, and I think try to accomplish our goals that way. So I don't know if if we just kind of plug and play into the CDCIP type board or process. I have heard that they are pretty loaded with work as it is, and so it may be an additional burden on that particular board. But I'm positive that we can do something that would involve the public.
The Business Advisory Board has been asking for a role for a long time.
Yeah.
So there could be any number of
something like
things.
that. And we had originally actually had proposed that some configuration of the Human Rights Commission and the CDCIP board would be kind of a good combination, but don't want to make assumptions about what members of the voluntary boards would be up for wanting to do.
And is it one board for all 4 million, even though we're splitting it into 2 separate buckets, or would there be 2 groups?
Either, whatever we
TBD.
decide
Right.
with you.
I'm just trying to think for frame of reference. Like, do we have any idea, like, what size we're trying to award out? I mean, it makes a difference if we're going to award like 1,000 micro grants or if we're going to do 10 larger grants. The workload changes significantly.
Yeah. This is something that the city does with CIP, where there's a $50,000 minimum. The city also does it based on HUD's recommendation that there's a $30,000 minimum, because applying and administering and meeting all of the reporting requirements takes time and money in and of itself. So there is, and you know this because you work in the nonprofit world, there is a certain threshold that the city could discuss setting, but we don't have that set now. That would be something to further discuss.
It just seems like an important question to decide how we do this, because delegating to a new board, I'd like to keep the work scope very specified.
Yeah.
We don't know enough yet to delegate.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one? And did we have another one, Ben?
That is all of the items.
Okay.
Real quick, I just want to lump, I would put item D1, the 100K from the EDLF, also in the same category of the delegation discussion that we just had, that I just don't think we know enough yet to be able to delegate it appropriately.
Okay. Cindy?
One question that I was just asked is about the what you could call structural deficit, or the ongoing expenses that are recommended in the budget opening, and whether the council could receive that information of which of the things that they're being asked to authorize have an ongoing expense, just so that it's added up. No, did I say that clearly? Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. I think that is all we have on this agenda item for today. I imagine we'll be talking about this next week as well. At least part of it. All right, budget amendment. I saw the number 4 on my agenda and just said budget amendment number 4, but really we're talking about an alley vacation at the 1200 block of Kensington and Bryan Avenue. And I believe there's Brian. Hi, Brian. We have Brian Fulmer from one of our council office policy analysts here on the big screen. And then I believe we have Nick Norris and Aaron Barlow from planning also available with us. So I will turn this time over to you, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a proposal to vacate an east-west city-owned alley at approximately 1550 south between the Mcclellan Trail, which is about 1200 east, and 1300 east. The alley is impassable due to a garage constructed obstructing access at the east end, and there are other encroachments from other abutting properties that have been in place for many years. If the alley is closed, it will have no impact on the Mcclellan Trail. That's an important point. And the applicant, I believe, is available to answer questions if council has any. With that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Hello, council.
We can't hear you, Aaron. Not very well, anyway.
Oh, okay. Me now, okay?
It's better now, yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's good.
Oh my gosh.
Yay.
Dang it.
It seems like Aaron's having some technical difficulties, so it might be best if we, that was a pretty good description of the proposal and the issue. It might be, I don't know if we have a presentation that shows a map of where this alley is.
There we go.
Okay, so, well, I'm just gonna start in the interest of time. Here's the description. You can see this basically runs from the Mcclellan Trail east up to 1300 east, where this alley, it mostly exists on paper. Can you go to the next slide, please? There is one. There you go. So this north is to the top of the screen. You can kind of see where this alley would go, particularly on the eastern side, on the right-hand side of the screen. You can see where it's blocked and there's no real access. And then you can see that there's several structures, buildings that encroach into that alleyway. Next slide. Here's an image from 1300 East, so you can see what's blocking the alley. Next slide. And then here's the view from the Mcclellan Trail with the approximate location of where the alley would be. Next slide. So the Planning Commission forwarded a positive recommendation to the City Council to close the alley with the condition that there's a utility easement established, because I think there's some existing utilities in that location. Next slide. And I think that's probably it.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Council members, any questions on this? Dennis?
I got a quick one. What exactly does the utility easement look like?
A utility easement is usually just a description of a width, and authorizes, if there's existing utilities, it basically authorizes access to all those utilities if there isn't already something in place, and authorizes them to do the work mainly. I mean, just like when there's power lines behind your home, you know, the power company has a right to go through your property to get access to their equipment and to do any kind of service or upgrades or work.
So they would just have to come through the front gate rather than through the alleyway that there's no access to anyway?
Yeah, right now that's how they do it anyway, because there's no access because of the structures blocking.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So Nick, with this alley vacations, I forgot, they had to get most of the signatures from all of the neighbors, correct? And I'm assuming that that's happened. And then also, does the city get compensated for disposing this piece of land? I forgot.
So with an alley, it requires 75% of the abutting property owners to sign to consent to the application going forward. So that has happened because we don't accept the applications if they don't have that. For residential alleys abutting residential uses like this, we do not, they're not required to pay for that alley. And that's partly because these alleys, when they were created, were usually extracted during a subdivision process. And so generally those things go back into that subdivision land, which means they get typically split between the properties on each side of the alley down the middle.
Right. Thank you.
Council members, any other questions? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Oh, wait, I have a question. Did we have any feedback from the community members in the area? Any negative feedback from?
I can jump in. I can jump in. It looks like Aaron might be having still some issues, but no, the only questions that we really got on this, I think there was a bit of confusion thinking that the vacation was going to impact the canal trail, and it does not impact the canal trail. So once we clarified that, there weren't any issues.
Okay, and I know that I think that the applicant is on the line. I'm happy to have the applicant speak if the applicant would like to. I don't know. Anyone? Going once?
Madam Chair, the applicant let me know he was available to answer questions, but didn't have a presentation that he was intending to make to the council.
Perfect. I don't think there are any other questions, so we will move on. Thanks, everyone. Agenda item number 5 is another alley vacation. This is the Columbus Street Alley north of Victory Road. Again, we have Brian from one of our office policy analysts, Nick Norris, and David Gellner from planning. So, well, Nick left and delegated his work. Ugh. So I'll turn the time over to Brian.
Thank you. This is a proposal to vacate another city-owned alley. It's adjacent to properties in the 500 North block of Columbus Street and one property that is on Victory Road. There's another alley segment to the north of this one, which was vacated a number of years ago, and the southern end of this alley segment abuts a UDOT right-of-way, as I mentioned, to the south. The alley is undeveloped and exists only on paper. Once again, the applicant is available to answer questions if the council has any. And with that, I will turn it over to David Gellner.
Okay, hopefully my audio is coming through. Looks like it. Okay, so as Brian mentioned, this is a vacation for a platted segment of alley, about 150 feet long. Good Taylor put up the zoning map, kind of shows this segment.
It's recorded, but it's never been developed. Compasses approximately 2,750 square feet of area, and it abuts 5 properties with 4 different owners, and all of them signed the petition to have this vacated. The city surveyor looked at this. It had an odd method of creation. It may have not been intended to be an alley. It was part of a slope easement, but it appears on some of our plat books and that going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. Also, the idea that it might have been dedicated as a right-of-way through the original city platting. So it was never an alley per se. It was never established as a regular alley. The zoning is mixed. It's got residential on the one side and then open space zoning, but privately owned on the west side. I'm sorry, the residential's on the east. Again, if you go to the next slide, we have a couple of photos of the, we can get, yep, there we go. Kind of shows where this is located behind the houses on Columbus. And then maybe the next one after that. It'll show kind of its steep topography coming up from Victory Road. So even if the alley were not to be vacated, it's very unlikely that it ever could be built just based on the topography, and it would essentially go to nowhere since there's no continuation. So other city departments have looked at this, and no future city uses were identified for the alley and no objections to its vacation. Answer any questions you have.
Sorry. Council members, any questions on this? I don't see any. So we thank you very much, David, for your presentation, and Brian for being with us, but we'll move on to the next agenda item. With that, we are at agenda item number 6, which is a rezone at Redwood Road and Indiana Avenue. Nick, you're over there. We have Nick Tarbett, Council Office Policy Analyst, Nick Norris, and David Gellner again from Planning. So actually, Nick, I'll turn the time over to you.
You're correct. And sorry I didn't walk the 100 yards over to the other side of the room.
That's
As you mentioned, this is a rezone at 835 South Redwood Road and at 1668 West Indiana from R1 5000 to RMU 45. The property currently contains an individual single-family dwelling, and the other property is vacant. There's no specific site development proposal that has been submitted at this time. And just so that everybody's aware, this was originally scheduled for a briefing on November 16th, but had to be postponed due to time constraints on the agenda that day. So the public hearing, it will also be held later this evening. With that, I'll turn the time over to David Gellner.
Okay, Nick introduced the basics on it. So current zoning is R1 5000 single family, and I think I did have a couple slides. Good. Catch up with that. Current zoning is R1000 single family, and requested change to RMU, residential mixed use, 45 feet allowed. Combined property area is about 0.28 acres or 12,000 square feet. The applicant has indicated they want to develop a new mixed use on the site, and the west side master plan is not being changed with this request, as this was identified as the location of a community node in the west side master plan, this intersection of Redwood and Indiana. Also, this is also within the 9-line planning area in a geographic focus area identified in that plan. We looked at the zoning compatibility with adjacent properties, and the CC zoning on the other corner would allow development up to 45 feet in height by right. This property, if it were rezoned to RMU 45, could not exceed the 45-foot height limit as it backs up to single-family residential, so there's no process to exceed that 45 feet height limit. Also, the existing alley on the north side of the property provides some additional buffering to the north, to the properties that are across the alley. And again, we looked at some alternative zoning districts, and this one encompasses the design standards and things that would help mitigate potential future uses to the adjacent residential properties. And staff has recommended, the Planning Commission had a positive recommendation on this to council. You can answer any questions you have.
Council members, are there questions on this?
Do we have a specific proposal for this site, or we're just doing this in anticipation of soliciting proposals?
David, did you hear that?
Yes. There is no specific site development plan or application for any kind of proposed development for the site at this point.
In conjunction with this, is there any commitment from other entities in the city? We are proposing a lot of density potentially for this intersection, and it is woefully unprepared for it, including school children walking home without protected sidewalks from Wallace Stegner Academy that is right around the corner there. This is a really, really dangerous area for us to add density without committing ourselves to an infrastructure overhaul as well.
Dennis?
My biggest argument would be just a chicken or the egg, and if we get the potential for more people in there, then we have enough impetus to be able to push forward that development to install those sidewalks and more clear crosswalks across Redwood, that sort of thing. So I think this could be a good step in the right direction.
It needs to be high on our priority list if we approve this. It's dangerous right now.
Council members, any other questions? Okay, thanks Nick and David. With that, man, I thought we were gonna be behind schedule, but we are ahead of it. Good work, council members. We are scheduled for a break right now. So, we're scheduled to come back at, oh no, we're scheduled for a break at 4:30. Well, let's take a 20-minute break right now. Thanks, everyone. We are back from our break, and before we get started on the next agenda item, I just wanted to let you all know that during the break, Ben Ledke read my mind, first off. Let's just throw that out there. And created just this one sheet of budget amendment number 4. Did you not get one, Dennis? Yes. So this is simply, as very well laid out, the remaining items as of today of budget amendment number 4. Ben categorized them into adopt and hold for January based on the feedback that we have given throughout these discussions. And so, as I mentioned before, I'm interested in trying to hold a formal vote next week, next council meeting, December 14th. And so I wanted to give this to people, so if this list is wrong or if there's other concerns, then we can sort of address it before next week's formal meeting through small group meetings, Ben talking to the administration, council staff, each other, things like that. And I know that there has been some information that has been asked of, like the ongoing sort of gap or continued need with some of these requests. And so with that, I thought we'd get some more information. It sounds like for the most part, we're pretty supportive of a lot of these programs, just need a little more information. So I want to make sure that you have that and are prepared to vote, have a formal vote next week. Okay, with that, I will turn that we are on agenda item number 8, which is our healthcare innovation blueprint presentation. And we have Allison Rowland, one of our council office policy analysts here. The mayor may not know that we're back from break. I'm not sure. We have Ben Collender, our deputy director of economic development. I don't know, it says deputy. Clark Cahoon, technology and innovation strategic industry advisor. And one of my favorite people, no offense to everybody else, but Natalie Gochner, the director of the KEMC Gardner Policy Institute. So Natalie, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all of you for joining us. I know that we bumped this once, so I appreciate you being flexible with us and our agenda and coming back to us this time. So with all of that, I'll stop blushing and adoring over Natalie and turn the time over to Allison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try not to blush either. This is, so as the chair said, this is the informational briefing about healthcare innovation blueprint that was produced by the Gardner Policy Center and the Department of Economic Development. This is an administration initiative to develop a plan and a strategy for one, supporting businesses in the healthcare innovation sector, and 2, helping Salt Lake City students reach careers in this sector through internships and other opportunities. The presentation today is the product of this work by Gardner Policy Institute, as well as an advisory group of people involved in economic development and healthcare innovation sectors, including our own council member, Dan Dugan. This briefing is informational only, as I mentioned, but the administration has asked the council for direction and next steps on this work. So I'm sure they'd be very interested in what you have to say. And then just because I am a budget analyst at heart, really all the way through, I wanted to mention that—
Allison, time out. Sorry, I just got a text that your speaker was not on, or the audio is not on your microphone. So you may have to start your presentation all the way over. I'm not sure.
Is this any better?
Oh. Yes, that's much better.
As long as that wasn't the case through the whole meeting, I think we can handle it.
Okay, well, did you have more, Allison?
I had just one paragraph more.
Can you, over there in WebEx land, hear Allison? No, okay. So.
Hello, can you hear me?
No.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, well, let's do this. I think, who are you planning on turning it over to next?
Ben Collender and
Clark?
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes, take it away.
Okay, great, thank you. Clark Cahoon, focus on technology and entrepreneurship initiatives with the Department of with the Economic Development Office here at the city. Really excited to share this with you. We've been working with an advisory board on shaping how we're going to focus our economic development efforts and capture the momentum that the healthcare innovation industry, which is life sciences and digital health, and making sure that it's a human-focused, a people-centered approach to economic development, and making sure that opportunities for all residents of the city can see themselves with the growth. Just a couple quick things right off the bat. This industry has sticky jobs. It has a multiplier effect in the fact that there are multiple entry points into this industry, whether that's people coming from a community college, whether they have a high school education or not, or advanced degrees. Another component to this is there's a really strong pipeline of innovation for this industry with the University of Utah and the way that they commercialize their technologies. And it's fast growing. It's the fastest growing in the US. And with that, it's a really diverse industry as well. So we're known for medical devices, but we also have really strong diagnostic and a growing therapeutic and growing digital health component. And all of these things are kind of folding together. So I'm going to turn it over to Natalie, and we're going to go over the blueprint, the actual document that's outlining where our focus, our attention's going with this industry.
Thanks so much, Clark. You give me the thumbs up if you're hearing me okay. Perfect. I wonder, I don't know if it's Taylor or someone else, but I was hoping I could share my screen up. Looks like Taylor, I have changed the presentation, so I need to go with a different screen. Can you give me permission to share?
Yeah, 2 seconds.
Okay, perfect.
And I'll just jump in while we're getting those up. This is the first focus we have on Mayor Mendenhall's Tech Lake City initiative. So wanting to focus and make sure that we're aligned in capturing the opportunities that are happening with a really fast-growing technology sector within the state, and making sure that we're harnessing that, but having it be a really people-focused approach as well. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Very good. Thanks, Clark. All right, so Clark, and you're now seeing my slide deck, is that correct? Okay, very good. Thanks so much for welcoming me to the council work session today. Natalie Gochner, I direct the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. Thanks, Chair Fowler, for the kind words. And my purpose today is to just walk you through some very exciting work that we've been doing with Salt Lake City, with Ben and the mayor's team. And what I want to do is first just kind of set some context for you. And, you know, my training's in economics, so I think about economics as we think about an economic strategy like this. And, you know, all economies function in some sort of global, national, regional, neighborhood context. And for Salt Lake City, the context is this, you know, Salt Lake City is the economic heart of the state. It has a large and diverse economy. It's where everything comes together, the seat of government, the transportation hub, the legal and financial center, Center for Arts and Culture, so certainly the economic center. And as you think about that, it becomes really a focus when you're doing an economic development strategy for Salt Lake City. Where do you focus? Where do you put your energies? And I think we can make a really compelling case that the healthcare innovation sector is a sector that is worthy of prioritization. When I say it, think of healthcare companies that create value in life sciences, med tech, health tech, you know, instruments, device manufacturing. Think of these industries that are creating value, and through that value, creating opportunity. And how do we take that opportunity and grow our economy and provide opportunities for all? So just thinking a little bit more about the economics of it, and Clark mentioned this a little bit, but I like to think of I'm going to focus here on life sciences because it's such a large share of healthcare innovation. But if you think of the life sciences industry, it's large, it's rapidly growing, it's very concentrated in Salt Lake County, and it's very stable. And I just want to show you a little bit of data on that. So nationally, Utah ranks first in the country for life science as a share of total employment. So there's the top 5 states listed here, but you can see that Utah's at the top. Clark mentioned that it's rapidly growing. He quoted that it's the fastest growing. It actually is over 1 year, the most recent year. But if we look at a 5-year average, it's the 4th fastest growing. And so what you see here are the 20 largest life science states. And you can see that Utah's right up there in the top echelon and rapidly growing over this period. So large, rapidly growing, and then it's very centralized. Unlike some aspects of the tech sector in our state that has very much a Utah County presence, when it comes to healthcare innovation and the life science industry, it's very much a Salt Lake County focus, with 66% of the employment being in the capital county, the state's largest county. We have, over 1,100 life science industries in the state. And then I added this just as a way to think about life sciences, but on this graphic, we take employment in 2007 for life sciences in red and all the other industries in gray. And then we say, what's happened since 2007? Of course, we've had 2 recessions, the Great Recession and the pandemic recession. And if you look at this, you can see how rapidly growing life sciences is, but you can also see how through 2 very serious economic downturns, it continued to create opportunity and to grow. And so it becomes, I hate to say recession proof, but it's probably as close to that as we have. So this large, growing, centralized, and stable industry presents all sorts of opportunities. And what the Gardner Institute did is, working with the city, we worked this idea, the idea of a blueprint for a healthcare innovation industry. We worked it through something we call the informed decisions process at the Gardner Institute. Now that's a term of art that we use to represent, we get guidance from community leaders. We take a multidisciplinary team with a lot of voices. We have structured meetings. We have a very clear scope and mission. We're very data informed. And through that, we come up with some good ideas. And in this case, we're just sharing with you basically an update or a level setting, keeping you in the loop of where this is going through the mayor's office. So you can see this advisory group, lots of industry representatives, the multicultural community represented. You can see Council Member Dugan there, who attended a meeting or 2. So you can kind of see the way that we structured this and the way we tried to get feedback. This group, all good efforts begin with vision, and this is the vision that we've put into words. I'll let you just kind of read that there, but we're basically saying that the capital city will be a premier or best-in-class healthcare innovation hub. When you see innovation there, think of a place where you create value, a hub where it's centered. And that in doing this, we're going to provide expanded, not just economic opportunities, so not just jobs, but also in the category of getting a twofer, improved health and well-being for all residents. And I'll just emphasize this all there. So that's a very important part of where this is headed. And so to lead something like this, you have to think, where are we headed? That's the vision. In the process, it became really clear that there were some opportunities and challenges. And in economic development work, it's very common to talk about physical capital. I think of infrastructure when I say that. Financial capital, I just think of having the means, the ability to invest. Intellectual capital, I think of human talent. And it's very common to put those 3 together. But for this process, with an interest in being inclusive, equitable growth, taking a global perspective, leveraging existing assets, being very collaborative. We've added this circle of human and social capital. So this very holistic view of the opportunities and challenges, all with an undergirding of some important principles of inclusive growth. So as I walk through now, what I'm going to walk through is basically the 4 pillars or recommendations that the advisory group came up with. And they fall into the categories of storytelling, so branding, promoting, and growing, increasing investment, so finding ways to invest more, pathways and partnerships, we can do more together, and then strengthening the foundation and removing barriers. And I'll walk through each of these one by one. So in the brand, promote and grow, of course, Tech Lake City helps with that. We've got an umbrella to think about, but you've also got to tell your story and build a global brand. I think that BioHive, BioUtah, lots of great partners to help in this. But basically, you need to maintain and grow Salt Lake City's reputation as a healthcare innovation center. It is already that, but we want to double down and think that we recommend that you do more of that. A brand is really a promise that motivates action. So we want to motivate a lot of private and public decisions that would create opportunities in this sector. I will also just mention that the University of Utah can help significantly here. Clark mentioned it, but the University of Utah, of course, is a member of the American Association of Research Universities, as a Pac-12 university, as our flagship institution, and located here in the capital city, can do a lot to help there. The second pillar is this increased investment. Here, we're talking about industry partnerships. Again, the university can help there with our Pivot Center, capitalizing on private capital and social impact investments. Here, our stature nationally as a place where there are a lot of industrial loan corporations and Community Reinvestment Act funds. We are also a place where social impact investments have happened and more will happen. And then we collaborate so well, which is what it takes to have these industry partnerships. The third recommendation is to emphasize pathways and partnerships. And here we're really talking significantly about education, investing in human talent and minimizing the friction from getting someone from their training to their job. That's connecting these pathways. And I think the STEM Action Center, the Talent Ready pathways, maybe keeping an open mind about new ways to innovate and reinvent, post-secondary education to be helpful here. I will just, as an anecdote, share that I found in my public service that almost every public policy problem, if you just strip it down to its essence, if you take care of education, you will help. And then the fourth pillar is to strengthen and the foundation and remove barriers. So you strengthen the foundation and remove the barriers. And when we say create a baseline, you have a vision where you want to be at some point in time, but you have to measure and know where you are presently and what it takes to get there. And so you have to invest in data. We have to think about reducing business barriers. That's code for regulation and zoning. Inventory R&D opportunities. Think of the Point, the prison location, and some of those natural partnerships that will come as the state invests heavily in a research center, if you will, at the point of the mountain, and some of the cross-pollination that can occur with the city. And then certainly when you're reducing barriers, you've got to have a real estate plan to make it all happen. So this is the blueprint that we've prepared for the city. I think the point here now is that this is just really an update, keeping you in the loop. There's lots more to happen, but it's really been a privilege for the Gardner Institute to collaborate with this. And with that, I will turn the time back over to Chair Fowler for questions, unless, Clark, you want me to pass it to you.
I'll just say a couple quick things, and thank you so much, Natalie, for that presentation. The focus of this blueprint is really public and private partnerships and making sure that we can leverage that momentum to our largest, strongest capabilities. And it's when we collaborate and work with other organizations and groups, we kind of reimagine, what can be done and the connectivity that could be even stronger and greater. And so when we start thinking about the education and the workforce development components and tying in the University of Utah, Salt Lake Community College, working with the Salt Lake School District and making sure that this momentum in this industry is aligning with the needs of our residents and making sure that every single resident can see and understand the opportunity. It gets me really excited and it pumps me up knowing that we're creating that web and we're working towards the right things. And so thanks for that presentation. And really the advisory board is what made this all come together with the direction of the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. So I know we're open for questions and happy to answer any of those between myself and Natalie and Ben Collender.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for that great presentation. Council members, can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Whew. Council members, are there any questions? I'll start. I have a couple. I was looking at the list of people that were like on the advisory board, I guess we could call it, and I was curious if there was any input from the business advisory board as far as reviewing the outcome of this or being participants in these meetings. I know we had staff and a council member there, but we do, I think, rely in some ways on we do rely and want to rely on our business advisory board. So I'm wondering what input they may have had or will have in the future.
We're actually meeting with them tomorrow, and there has been a lot of connectivity with our office and with them. Not so much with the process where we've gotten to right now, but right now is where we're still gaining feedback. This is still in, not the final form. It's really close to it, but the business advisory board is really important, and we're looking forward to that meeting tomorrow to coincide with this.
Oh, that's great. And then what sort of actions does the administration plan on doing next, or what are the next steps for the administration?
I can chime in on this, Council Chair Fowler. In the big picture, the main purpose of this blueprint was to convene industry and partners to get feedback about this industry that we've looked into. So that was something within Tech Lake City that was a specific action item the administration was interested in doing. After this, we've received some questions from the council about what are the specifics that the city is willing to entertain. And a lot of this is going to be around the regulatory barriers, and the council has heard some of the zoning amendments already. But what we intend to do out of this, and after the business advisory board meeting that Clark is slated to attend tomorrow and discuss with them, is come back with more concrete details about what considerations we would propose as an administration to the council.
Anna?
So it almost seems like it's almost like when you are in a business, like you're offering a new product, right? And then you're saying, okay, we're going to offer this. We're going to do all the branding and all the marketing that we can do to push this product out, but we also need to invest in this product. And that's a shift in economic development that we haven't done before. I don't think, like, we haven't focused that much. We focused a couple years ago with the small businesses as Ben put together his department and really beefed up the staffing and the time that they spend doing this this relationship building with a small businesses, and then a pandemic hit and all of that stuff. But but now we're looking at a different way of doing businesses or a new way for economic development for the city to focus on, that will ultimately benefit, our bottom line in terms of budget. But we also need to figure out what else can we offer this new industry as we compete with other counties, right? For them to be located. So, I think like the low-hanging fruit is the regulatory part that we all know, that Ben mentioned, that those things we can do. That's something that we have the power on, but we also need to look a little bit deeper. So I'm excited to listen to what Ben has to offer on that. And then I was wondering if there's any connection between the Sorensen idea that the mayor proposed with education investment and this, like in terms of workforce. I don't know if there's any connection in there that we can combine forces.
I would say at an early stage, my colleague Jake Maxwell as well as Clark Cahoon are highly coordinated, but as we work through those details, we're in an early stage with the social impact investment discussions. So we've looked at potential interventions, and we're exploring in the next phase potentially financial models and what that looks like to make those investments. So as that becomes clear, we'll make sure as a department that those two initiatives are highly coordinated.
And also to add to that, we've been working with the Salt Lake School District, the foundation, and making sure that those connections between industry and the students and parents and understanding kind of what's connected there. So we're not just, we haven't just gone through this process of convening this board and getting feedback and creating this blueprint and kind of sitting on our hands. We've got a lot of things kind of in motion that we're developing relationships and partnerships with. And it's going to be really fun and interesting to get the momentum from this industry and make those connections even further, specifically on the education, STEM related, and the workforce components, because there's a real, there's a need that companies have, and there's a need that our education partners have as well. And so we're helping bridge that gap and tie those things together.
I'll add one other element to that.
Hold on. Can you guys hear the mayor? Sorry, I didn't mean to just say hold on. I just know that we're having trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like we can hear you. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thanks for that question. And absolutely, it's our intention to actually prioritize the workforce training elements of the social impact concept with those economically resilient, highest paying, most mobile jobs that are happening in our state. And in the meantime, part of, there's been conversations with BioHive and some of the healthcare industry representatives who are on the BioHive board that I also serve on about potentially applying for some of the $2 million in the rescue plan dollars we talked about earlier that are hopefully going to go to economic development for grant money to help connect Salt Lake City residents who need to have better access to the economic strength that our capital city and our state are experiencing, but is not reaching the historic neighborhoods that have never really had great access to it. And I'm hopeful that they're going to be applying BioHive with the healthcare innovation sector and groups, community-based organizations, potentially ones like we worked with through the Salt Laker card, who are connected to those community members to do recruitment and support potentially, I can imagine the grant supporting their transit access to the jobs. And these businesses, some of these businesses that are already here in Salt Lake City are so desperate for workforce that they're going into, they're walking into businesses like nail salons and hiring technicians who have dexterity and could be building the healthcare innovation materials that they need. So anyway, they're going out there and they're figuring out already how the healthcare innovation can fill in the workforce needs that they need. We want them to be doing that with Salt Lake City residents specifically. So we're looking at it from almost every angle that we can, and yes, with the social impact investment, but potentially also with the rescue plan dollars for economic development. So it's exciting. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council members?
Council Chair Fowler, it's
please.
Natalie. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, the camera goes off, so you can't tell, but you can tell I put up the recommendation screen again, and I just wanted to mention that the council member Valdemoros is right in the sense that you have to, all of this has to work together, right? And if you do any one of these in isolation, it's not as powerful. And I just wanted to really double down on that point, that as you brand and storytell and invest and remove barriers and align education with it, I think that's where the real magic starts to happen. And so I think you've got a really strong start at where you're headed here.
Thank you. Council members, other questions? And I just want to say, I appreciate was something that Madam Mayor said, and that we want Salt Lake City residents to benefit from this. We want people to live, work, and play here. So I would hope, and I imagine, that as we're looking at this and as this is developing, we're also looking at how, at the other very important presentation that Natalie has given us, and that is on housing and the affordability and attainability of housing, and that we want Salt Lake City residents to be here, and we can bring jobs in, we can bring these innovative ideas in, and we need to overlay that with how do we keep them to stay here and live here, right? And so I know how important housing and keeping people in Salt Lake City is to all of you. So I think as we continue going forward with this and having these discussions, that is sort of one of those other, maybe removing the barrier to sub point there, right, is really removing the barrier of living in Salt Lake City. And so I think that can be an interesting conversation. Look forward to that. If there's nothing else on this, I would just like to say thank you so much for joining us, Natalie. I really appreciate it. Always appreciate the work that you and your team do. So with that, we will move on. Thanks so much. We are, council members, we are on agenda item number 9, which is the city consent to subleases at the Leonardo. For this presentation, we have Ben Ludke, one of our council office policy analysts. We have Kimberly Scheitris, our senior city attorney, and then Blake Thomas, the CAN director, Tammy Hunsaker, the deputy director of community services, and I believe we have some people from the Leonardo here that are available for any questions that we may have. So I will turn the time over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the first briefing on this topic, and the council also has a public hearing scheduled for this evening and potential action next Tuesday, December 14th. So property management is typically an administrative function. It's not something that's on the legislative branch of separation of powers. This item is coming to you today like a public benefit. Is this one any better?
The one the mayor had. Okay, we may have to take a brief break, and I forgot that Cindy Lou had asked me to take a brief break while we look at this.
Can you hear me now?
Tammy's saying yes.
Okay. So shall we try this again? Okay, you can start all over.
All right, take 2. I think more people can hear me now. So property management is typically an administrative function. It is not something under separation of powers that is typically legislative for the council. This item is coming to the council as a public benefits analysis. So this is where an analysis is required for the private use of a public asset. In this instance, the public asset is the former main library building, and the private use is subleasing to tenants at that city-owned property. Now, a sublease must have three requirements in order to be allowed, and I'm going to go over each of them quickly. The first requirement is it must advance a public purpose to comply with state law. The second is the sublease must comply with the purpose for the bond that voters approved back in 2003, which provided for improvements to that building, and the city continues to make payments on that bond, which is why the requirement still exists. The ballot language stated the bond would pay for the costs of renovating, improving, and preserving the old main library building and providing related facilities located at approximately 5th South and 2nd East to establish a science, culture, and art education center. The third requirement is in the primary lease between the city and the Leonardo, specifically Section 19, which does allow subletting with the written consent of the city, and that any tenant with a sublease must have a direct relationship to the Leonardo's mission and programming plan. The Leonardo's mission is exploring and connecting art, culture, and science in imaginative ways to enrich people's lives, expand consciousness, and enhance the community. I won't go into the programming plan. If you have questions on that front, I would defer to the executive director of the Leonardo, who I believe is sitting behind me. The city has leased the former library building to the Leonardo since June of 2009. There is a resolution for the council to authorize the mayor's administration to approve any subleases at the Leonardo as long as it fulfills those three requirements I talked about: the state law public purpose, the voter approved bond purpose, and it has to relate directly to the Leonardo's mission and programming. It's important to note that any sublease would not change the primary lease between the city and the Leonardo. So whatever subleases may happen over future years, they do not change the terms of that primary lease. There's a copy of the primary lease in the transmittal and in your packet today. There's also a draft sublease agreement and a public benefits analysis specific to Ken Sanders' rare books. There's 4 policy questions if the council is interested. The first is you may wish to discuss if you support this delegating authority approach. So this is delegating the authority from the council to the mayor's administration to see if every individual request for a sublease checks those 3 boxes. If you did not use this delegating approach, then every request for a sublease would come to the council for individual approval. The 3 requirements would remain the same, but the council would decide instead of the administration. So the resolution today is to delegate that decision-making power to the mayor's administration for any future subleases. The other questions, if the council's interested, is what are the long-term plans for the old library building? If you would like a status update from the administration on maintenance and capital improvement needs at the building, the primary lease does require the city to have responsibility for some repairs and replacements at the building, such as the electrical and plumbing system and the foundations of the building. But other types of maintenance and replacement are the responsibility of the Leonardo. And then the last question is if there would be signs or facade changes that the public would see to advertise and reflect that there are new tenants using the building if a sublease were approved. The end of the staff report has some background information about the original bonds that were refinanced to save taxpayers money, the former building's specs, the length of the primary lease between the Leonardo and the city, and some recent investments that the city has made to the building and with the Leonardo for one of its programs. That is everything I have for my intro.
Thank you, Ben. Quick question. When is the bond supposed to be paid off?
So it was refinanced in 2017, and I think it's still a decade out.
Okay. I was just curious. Doesn't have anything to do with my thoughts on this thing. Just curious. Council members, do you have any questions? Dan?
More specifically on the delegation of authority, you said about subleases across the city. I mean, how many subleases would we see as a city council if we were to be to approve one individually?
So I should clarify that the delegation of authority for subleases is specific to the building across the street.
Oh, just okay.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So we wouldn't be seeing a ton of them because they've, gotcha.
Nope.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anna?
I would like more information about the long-term plan, like a little bit more clarity on what's going on with the Leonardo in general, so that Ken Sanders can start with like a fresh understanding of what's going on with that building and the agreement that we have with the Leonardo, like the city and the Leonardo, and then Ken Sanders moving in. So it's as clear as possible of what is going on and what can happen in the future. So that, you don't get into, all of a sudden you're, whoever leases it and a new sublease gets into this sublease and then not knowing that X, Y, and Z, needed to happen or will happen, and now maybe it's not a good idea to be there. So, so I would like more information, but I think, subleasing for those purposes that you mentioned, great stuff.
I have a little bit of information I can share, but I would also defer if anyone from Public Services, which has the Facilities Division, which would be in charge of city-owned property like this, as well as the Executive Director of the Leonardo, since the responsibilities for the building are split between the Leonardo as the tenant and the city as the owner. Each would have a say in some of those long-term plans.
Okay.
But what I do know is the building is about 87,000 square feet.
Okay.
It's got 5 levels, including a sub-basement. It was originally constructed in 1964, so it's already a half century old. It is unreinforced masonry, so there may be plans for seismic improvements to the structure, or there may be a need if there aren't plans. And the last estimate I saw from the Facilities Division, this was from 2020, they estimated that there was $4 million of deferred maintenance and improvement needs at the building, and this was across several categories, from improved efficiency to aesthetics to some life safety issues. So I don't have that breakdown, but it's details we could request. And I'm guessing that there's probably an updated number since my information's from 2020.
Thanks, Ben. I can help add some additional information. Can you hear me? There have been some recent health, safety, welfare improvements to the building. The Leonardo is materially in compliance with their lease. As outlined in the packet, the primary lease originally is for a 20-year term, was executed in 2009. That term was triggered when the substantial improvements were in place. So I don't have the exact date in front of me, but the original term expires in or around 2029. And then the Leonardo does have options through the primary lease for 10-year extensions. So from the city's perspective, the Leonardo is in compliance. They also have an EDLF loan out for some improvements that they did, and that they are current and up to date with their payments on the EDLF loan. And I will turn it over to Leonardo staff to add additional information on what their specific plans are.
Hi, thank you for joining us here. Come on up, whoever wants to be in the hot seat.
Thanks. Should I take this off or keep it
You
on?
can take it off while you're speaking, yeah. And if you'll just introduce yourself for us.
Yes, I'm Lisa Davis, and I am the board chair for the Leonardo, and I also worked with the Leonardo from the time it was going through the bond campaign all the way through in some capacity or another, and came back a few years ago to serve on the board. So I have a lot of history as well. So to your questions, Councilwoman, what I can tell you about is our partnership and what we have planned to do together and what we've already practiced together. As you probably know, Ken opened a pop-up location in the Leonardo back in February. And so we've been able to practice our relationship, which has been really great because we've got to learn how to live together. We've got to answer a lot of questions. We've got to practice doing joint programming together. And we are more sure than ever that this is a fabulous and really ideal partnership. You know, back in February, when we were just opening up after being closed to the public for almost a year because of COVID, we got together with Ken, and we knew his situation, and I know all of you know his situation. His building will be demolished very soon because that block is being redeveloped, and the thought of bringing someone and something so valuable into the Leonardo and having that be part of enhancing our mission was so exciting to us. And as Alex and Ken, I mean, these two are the brain children, and they're the creative geniuses, really. But when they get together and talk about what we can do as partners, it's just really exciting. I mean, you can imagine the context that Ken has, not just here in the city or even in the country, but internationally, of authors and artists that he can bring in. We have a wonderful auditorium that we want to get more use out of. And I know that that's been something the council and the mayor has asked us, is how to make better and bigger use of the building. This is one way that we are answering that request and doing that. We are talking, I don't know if any of you have had the chance to come and see a new gallery that we have, but it's really a big open space with high definition projections and sound machines in there, so that we can reprogram it again and again to project some really incredible immersive experiences. So Ken and Alex have been talking about doing something with authors and photography and film of Utah. And so there's just so much that we can do together. Everything from something as small as having Ken curate book collections for the exhibits and programs, whether it's a program that we're doing on the weekend with Artists in Mexico or the flight exhibit. We can make that content really fresh and really exciting for our visitors. We can also, they partnered to do a book club. And I know that Ken is really excited about starting a reading circle with kids. So can you imagine learning to read with having this man, read books to you? I mean, I don't know what could be more exciting for a child or a teenager for that matter. And so the programming is also multi-generational and multicultural in nature. And like I said, we've been able to practice via this pop-up location. And we're really excited and hopeful that this body will agree that this not only brings great value to our city, it strengthens both of our organizations, and it enhances our ability as the Leonardo to fulfill our mission.
Thank you. Council members, other questions? So,
Madam
yes,
Chair?
Tammy.
Really quick, I failed to introduce myself for the public record. Tammy Hunsaker, Deputy Director of Community and Neighborhoods. And one additional thing to add is that the administration recommends, for full transparency, that a public hearing be scheduled and held to determine or get input on whether the sublease would fulfill those public purposes that Ben outlined, and that is scheduled for the formal meeting.
Thank you. I think, and so I do have a question. This might go towards all three lovely women that are on the panel, both Tammy, Kimberly, and Lisa. But I'm sort of thinking about this, the delegation question here, the delegation of authority for this. And I mean, this sort of has been a conversation or a topic of conversation kind of throughout the day-to-day in various different realms. And I'm curious as to, like, if we were to say, yes, we're going to delegate this authority, and you can, the board can decide if this is the right fit or not. What other types of businesses or partners would the Leonardo be looking for or wanting if there were other pieces of the Leonardo that could be sublet?
I think we do the same analysis, if you're asking, and Alex, please chime in, that we do with any partner that we have. And anytime we look at a partnership, we always look at it as mission first. So it needs to be complementary, and not just complementary, but we have to be able to, it has to enhance our mission, and we also have to be able to enhance the mission of the partner, because we feel like these need to be really complementary and mutually beneficial partnerships for it to make sense and for them to be enduring and healthy. And so the first thing that we do as a board when we look at new partnerships is a mission match, period. So we would not partner, even if it's bringing in an exhibit or doing an event as the Leonardo, that we always do a partner or a mission match.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah,
I don't foresee us having a lot more needs for more subleases. Frankly, we have a lot of program partnerships, but I'm kneeling. It's not our expectation that there would be a lot of subleases. Okay, that there should be a lot more subleases coming your way. It is a large facility, but Ken will occupy a significant amount, as do we. So I don't think we expect this to be an ongoing effort to bring more and more sublease lessees into the Leonardo.
Okay. I see Katie popped on, and whenever Katie pops on, I think I know she has something to say. So I'm looking over at Katie and Kimberly. If one of you had something to add to that sort of my question, or at least my ramblings about that.
Thank you, Council Chair. Katie Lewis, the Salt Lake City Attorney. Nice to see you all today. And I'll just jump in and say, because of the overlay of the bonds on this particular public benefits analysis, this is really unique because the Leonardo's lease is in place, but there are the bonds that have the public purpose. And that made it so this public benefits analysis was necessary for a sublease, even though typically, as has been mentioned today, a sublease would be an administrative function. So I just want to clarify that that's really what makes this unique. And it probably makes sense to do it from a broader perspective, as long as the three topics are met, as Ben mentioned, because it really is, it's an atypical public benefits analysis, Council Chair.
So again, and we can get to sort of that analysis, but if we have to do a public benefits analysis, I'm just looking into the glass ball and asking questions, right? Like if there was another sub-leasee for this space, we were still under the constraints of the bond, then wouldn't that have to come to the council anyway to do this public benefits analysis?
In this case, I think that the council can adopt the resolution that identifies the three criteria for a sublease in the Leonardo, and then allow the administration to do that analysis, again, because of the unique overlay of the bonds and that public purpose and this particular property.
Okay. Council members, are there other questions here? Yes.
I'd like to look at this from when we delegate authority. I also think the public trust issues, and while I'm happy to hear that everything is current with Leonardo, we know that it has been a very rocky road and a pretty inconsistent road. Mr. Sanders' bookstore is a community institution, and in a worst case scenario, another rocky road imperiling him could lead to some significant public outcry and stress. Before we're subletting and creating these, are there assurances that we have a strategic plan in place and things that are going to ameliorate the past problems and offer increased stability and increased public trust in your institution and in his security as part of your institution?
Absolutely. And that is something I've been on the board through that rocky time. And we have, Alex and team really have worked very, very hard to look at the business model, to right-size it, to look at the exhibitions model, to right-size it, to experiment a bit with staffing, and have come to a really healthy balance there. And they've had a record now of about a year and a half of very healthy financial performance that is only improving with time, and also a really healthy forecast. And I, as someone who was here from the very beginning and knew that this was a great experiment by all of us, this was not something the city had ever done. This was not something that these three little organizations that were originally put into this giant building ever really imagined would be like. It's been a rocky road, but it's been a very productive learning process. And as someone who's on the board and has that fiduciary responsibility, I can definitely say with confidence that we are all very excited and confident about the Leonardo's, not just future, but current state.
Thank you, Lisa. Council members, are there any other questions?
I have one more. Then I think we talked, I think I had that question before, but I don't remember. What's the status with the utilities? Was there anything outstanding that we also had to like some housekeeping between our agreement with the Leonardo?
Yeah, the Leonardo was delinquent on some utility payments.
Okay.
My understanding is, and I don't know when they caught up, but my understanding is as of today, all utility payments have been caught up on.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I can
That is
add.
correct.
Yeah. Last April, we paid all the back utilities, and since then, we've been current every month. So
Awesome. Great, that's all I have.
Thank you. And Mr. Sanders, thank you for joining us. I don't know if there's anything that you would like to say at this time. If not, that's fine. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you do, you're more than welcome to. Yes, of course.
I don't want to waste the council's time, so I'll try to keep it to Reader's Digest form. I'm Ken Sanders. I've been buying, selling new books, used books, and rare books in the city for 45, 46 years now, since the cosmic airplane days of the 1970s. My late partner, Steve Jones, had founded the Cosmic Airplane at 9th and 9th, 1967, as a little hippie head shop, the first in Salt Lake City. Bruce Robertson, myself, Bruce had some money. I didn't, still don't, but I have a lot of books. And I created the bookstore part of the Cosmic Airplane. By the early 80s, I left the Cosmic Airplane. At the time, the store, through its gift shop, its record shop, its head shop, and the bookstore, we were grossing $1.4 million in 1981. Since then, I founded Dream Garden Press, a small publishing company that I keep active but small to this day, and I've now been at Ken Sanders Rare Books downtown for the past 25 years. There's lots of ups and downs. You guys know far better than I do the challenges that we've been facing, especially us in Salt Lake. We've all been through the COVID, but gosh, we get a bonus earthquake and a tornado that took all our trees down. I can't imagine just running my tiny little bookstore part of it, even compared to the Leo, is like, I realize just how small I am in the universe. This past year of running this consignment boutique store since February with Alex and with Lisa have been absolutely delightful. Over those 45, 46 years, I've created hundreds, thousands of poetry readings, author readings, artist debuts and readings, curated entire shows like the Salt Lake 60s show up at the Art Barn. It was some, 30 years ago now. Shows that hundreds and hundreds, if not a thousand, we at the city library for the 50th anniversary of Allen Ginsberg's Howl, we had over 1,000 people come to that event. The auditorium overflowed, the overflow rooms overflowed. It was just mania, and I really enjoy doing that sort of controlled chaos, if you will. We've tried to reach out to bring in controversial people, writers and authors and artists and speakers, and sometimes you fail, but you have to try things to do that. Right now, and Lisa and Alex don't even know this, Graham Nash of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, who we're not friends, but I know him, and he's just issued a brand new photography book. That's been his passion his whole life. And I've written him asking him if we could bring him and his photo show to the Leonardo. I'll probably fail, but you have to try. So it's just, I look at it, the big picture thing. Working with Alex and Lisa has been absolutely delightful. I'm certainly aware of the challenges. There's hundreds of small minutia and details and the big issues that Ben, you and the city attorney's office have been working on and grappling with, of which I don't really know anything about that stuff. I just want to be turned loose. I just turned 70 years old, but I want to reinvent myself one last time. And with the help of these women and the staff at the Leonardo, like when we opened, it was with the thrift store show that through accumulated detritus donated to a thrift store and curated into a show that shows us what racism and white privilege really is. And man, I can't tell you how badly us white people, especially me, who've thought of myself as a liberal person my whole life, needs that experience. And we echo that. We brought in the largest works on African American artists and culture and science and literature that has ever been in one place in this city. And I just want to keep doing that sort of thing. We're trying to do the same with the Monet to Kandinsky exhibit that's going on right now. And we hope to be able to build up and do many, many shows there. I'm planning one with Alex right now that will depict the what we call the Trans-Mississippi West through maps, and we're going to interpret the whole experience of who was here first, who came later, what this place was when the Mormon pioneers came here, what contributions, all of the different ethnic cultures, including the Mormons. You cannot tell the history of the American West without telling the story of the Mormon people. It's as important as anyone else's story. And so we want to be inclusive. We want to do all these things Alex mentioned, or maybe Lisa mentioned. We have started a book club, and it may traumatize the children for life, but I really, really love reading stories to kids. My own grandchildren actually like it, but they've gotten a little used to me. And I just think there's so many ways on artistic levels and science levels where whenever they're bringing something in, we can echo it. And we'll bring shows in. We can do little tiny shows that will use just the cafe and the entrance part, or the part, only a tiny part of my footprint will be on the main floor. The rest of it will all be hidden in the basement and the sub-basement. So there's going to be a lot of challenges, but we can use the 200-seat theater upstairs when we bring in somebody like Terry Tempest Williams. She's going to draw a huge crowd. She'll fill that theater in a heartbeat. And I'm really glad if this opportunity can come to pass. I'm willing to give it one more try. The alternative, you guys keep giving all the RDA and all these building permits, so 12 to 15 stories to the north of me, 10-story parking building behind me, 31 stories across the street from me, and who knows what the Ivory Company has planned for mine and the Green Ants block. We've been given until January of 22, so got a yearish. And if I don't do this, I mean, I'm too old, even if the bank would loan me a couple of $1 million, I'm too old to go into that kind of debt anymore. And it's not anyone's fault, but have you tried to price rentals or buying houses or renting business property? $45 a square foot? Yeah, I'll just fade off into the sunset otherwise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders.
Any questions?
Council members, any questions? Mr. Sanders, I just want to say thank you for being a part of the Salt Lake City community for as long as you have, and for sticking with us. I think that you have been a pillar of our community, and we continue, generations upon generations know of you and your bookstore, and so we do appreciate you being here and the work that you have put in and the vibrancy that you have brought to Salt Lake City. So thank you for that. I think...
Thank you, Councilwoman. Do you want to know my secret?
Yes. What is your secret?
I'm terminally unemployable.
I appreciate that. Thank you. We are going to have just one clarification from Katie. Sorry, Katie, I'm going to put you on the spot regarding the delegation of authority, and I think there's a little. So, Katie, I'm going to just turn it over to you.
Hi, council members. I realize that my answer was not the paragon of clarity, so I'm going to try again. Typically, when the city council considers a public benefits analysis, a 1082 analysis, it's because the city is giving away its assets for less than fair market value. In this case, the city is already leased to the Leonardo, and the sublease to Ken Sanders is actually for fair market value. So in most cases, a fair market value lease, it would not come before the city council. It would be an administrative decision. The bonds, however, require an identification of public purposes, as we've discussed. And so that was the reason to bring this before the council as a public benefit 1082 analysis and have the public hearing so that you all could participate in that public benefit conversation, even though it's not really about the fair market value of the lease. So I hope that that's a little clearer. And if you have any additional questions, I'm happy to answer them, but I just wanted to be sure to identify that distinction.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Council members, any further questions on this? Okay, well, we are set for action on this on December 14th, and there is a public hearing on this tonight, right? Okie doke. Thanks, everyone. Okay, council members, we are on to the report of the chair and the vice chair. Mr. Vice Chair?
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think I have anything to report. I do think that we have some announcements. So I will turn the time over to our executive director, Cindy Gus-Johnson.
We just have one, but it's a big announcement, and that is the staff has provided a draft of your annual meeting calendar, and I can quickly go through the adjustments. In the January, so typically the council meets the first 3 weeks of most months, except for in the summer, June, July, August, and also during December. But there are always variations, and so these are the variations. The RDA has requested that their meeting be on January 18th. Usually they meet the second Tuesday of the month, but this time they have a conflict, so they would like their meeting to be on the 18th instead of the 11th in January. In March...
Want me to ask about these as we go?
Yes, that'd be great.
Is everyone okay with that RDA change? Thumbs up, show your support. Okay.
Okay, so you're here on both nights anyway. Then March, the National League of Cities Conference is held the 14th through 16th. We would naturally have a work session on the 15th. In the case of the National League Conference, there's usually enough interest in that we scoot the council meeting, and so in this case, it would scoot to the 22nd of March.
Council members, are you okay moving that to the 22nd? Thumbs up?
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Then in May, Thursday, May 24th and 31st, we usually don't have council meetings on Thursdays, but during the budget, we sometimes do need those. We try to avoid those, but would like to ask you if you could block your calendar out and reserve May 24th and 31st for possible work sessions if we need those to get the budget completed.
I'm not going to ask for a thumbs up. We're just going to say you should reserve those.
Bad things happen if we
I'm
don't get
dictating
enough.
on that one.
And if we don't get enough input from you on the budget, bad things happen. Okay, in June, typically the council would take action on the budget at the meeting on the second Tuesday in June. We did list a tentative formal meeting on June 21st in case you're not prepared with enough information to adopt it on June 14th. if we go until June 21st, the staff melts into a puddle before your eyes, but
And for those that haven't been through a budget session, Victoria, we will too. Or there will be like knives and daggers and things, and it's like not.
yeah. Okay, then in July, typically the council avoids scheduling a meeting near the summer holidays. So the staff has guessed at meeting dates of July 12th and July 19th. So right in the middle.
Does that work for everybody?
Okay, and then in August, to accommodate Night Out Against Crime, we have suggested August 9th and August 16th for your council meetings. There's a trick to that, which is you always need to reserve with the county a potential truth and taxation hearing night. And so we would ask for that to be on the 9th, but it's possible that they will decline to give us that date. So August, sometimes we have to ask you to convene an extra evening just for that truth and taxation hearing. And if you're not making major changes to the budget, you don't need the hearing, but it's one of those things that we request permission for early on so that we can hope to get a date that works for you. So flexibility in August is appreciated, but the nights we're looking toward are August 9th and 16th.
And August 2nd is the Night Out Against Crime.
Correct.
Does that work for everybody? Great.
That's it.
Awesome. Council members, we have no closed session, and so our work session is adjourned. We are meeting in this room for our formal meeting at 7 o'clock.